And we are live on the tube. We're live on the tube.
Hello, Tube.
We're
Hello.
live.
You lovely
We are
people.
live.
Good evening.
It's live, and we are live on the tube.
Is there anybody out there?
I seriously doubt.
No.
Probably not yet.
I don't know. We've got a couple of people who normally like straight on it, mate. On it like Sonic. You know what I mean?
On it like a car bonnet.
Yeah, we got somebody on it.
Yeah, that's me.
We got 3 people on it.
Hi.
That would be me as well.
Hello.
What? You're 3 people, Owen? Yeah,
Mum,
it's big, mate. It's not that.
Mum,
big.
I'm on the teller.
That was me and Tricky.
So there's what 3? How does that make 3?
I don't know. There must. Oh,
It's 2 now. Somebody fucked it off.
Yeah,
Thought
it's
it was
me
so-
on.
someone can be bothered.
Thought it was shit. Tuned out.
I reckon it's Richard Brooks. Oh, we got 4 now.
I don't know. Okay, gentlemen, let's do the 3, 2, 1 and get us in there, okay? Are we all ready to click the button?
Suppose.
Hello,
Right,
Brett.
Is it Brett?
Yeah.
It's Brett Simmons.
Different
Oh,
Brett.
okay. Different Brett. Okay, ready?
Bit too.
3, 2, 1, click.
I liked the little flip off there, Chris.
I
That
mean-
was nice.
I could have gone 3, 2, 1 in Dusty Bin style, but none of you would have got that.
Oh, I clocked the bird that just got flipped.
What, the 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Yeah, I did see
that's
that.
all right
yeah.
then. That's good.
Yeah.
As long as you saw it. As long as you saw it.
Surreptitious abuse.
Yeah.
Oh, mate.
It was.
In case you haven't noticed, I do that at the start of every episode.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Right, I'm minimizing Audacity and I ain't touching it. So, Tricky, you're going to have to edit out a shitload of me vaping.
Excellent. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, sometime around about October. Yeast has arrived.
The other thing is, I think my chiller's obviously giving lots of noise in the background.
Your chiller. Excellent. That's just what we always wanted, isn't it?
Just, nah.
You and your fucking chiller.
Yeah.
Right
What the
then.
fuck?
Okay, so I've got notes up. I've got OBS up. I've got YouTube up. Audacity is minimized. Are we ready to rock and roll?
I think we're good to go.
I'm good to go.
Let's just wait for Owen to stop making more noise than anyone else on earth. Have you noticed how Owen's got a shirt on today?
Check me out.
Yeah, man.
I love scotch. Scotchy, scotchy, scotch. Down into my belly.
Is
You
that
got
what they
whis-
say?
What are you saying, whiskey?
Right, can we go?
Anchorman.
Okay, give me 3 seconds.
Oh.
Welcome to episode 33 of the Hop Edition podcast. And we are live on YouTube, as always. And today's episode is all about the big uns. And we're not talking about tits. We're talking about big beers. We're talking about your Impy Stouts. Talking about your Imperial Pilsners. We're talking about your Badger dry hopped Imperial Wherries. We are talking about barley wines. We're talking about the big uns tonight. Your Eisenbocks, your Maybocks, your triple IPAs. You know, them things that Owen puts on his cornflakes. That's what we're discussing tonight. We are going to be, well, I am going to be throwing some science at you guys. And Andy appears to be sitting in a place which is incredibly dark, like the worst lighting in the history of the world, considering he's the one who's got the, you know, wedding photography gig going off. That is the worst lighting I have ever seen, ever.
Yeah,
He's got a great light right behind him.
It's
It kind
shocking,
of
that, mate.
looks like he's got the moon right behind his head.
The moon.
The moon.
Yes. So we are going to be helping Yeast pack his bags for his holiday, and we've got a bunch of people on. literally on the live chat at the moment, who I don't remember seeing aside from Yeast, obviously. We've got Stephen Racinko, hello, and Brett Simmons, hopefully a relation to Gene Simmons, and that'd be really cool if that happened. So other than that, Andy's moving the moon.
I'm
This
moving
is-
them in, but it's
this is-
still shite.
Amateur hour, this. Right. So let's get on into it. Gentlemen, how are we all doing?
All good, thank you very much.
Shite.
Andy's really happy about having to work tomorrow, I can tell.
Oh, fuck.
He's
Yeah.
thrilled. Well, you got a wedding tomorrow, Andy.
I'm on a doubler this weekend, so I had a wedding yesterday and I've got a wedding tomorrow. So
It's an Andy double header.
I'll be honest, Andy, if you do it right, mate, you only need to get married once. That's all I'm saying.
I like to get married loads of times, mate.
I've
When
noticed,
are
yeah.
you brewing this afternoon as well, Andy?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So
Wow.
I brewed my, what do you call it, Bohemian Pilsner?
It's hardcore, that is.
Yeah. So we went to Bounce Station this morning, then out for some lunch, and then I got back. My brother popped over to drop off his keg, right? This is the keg I gave him 2 weeks ago with about 25 litres of beer in it. He'd absolutely smashed through the keg. Like, unbelievable. So he had a nice pail in it. But he basically proceeded to just get pissed every night, I think. It was just...
Every
as you
night for
do.
2 weeks.
I
And I
mean,
was
why
like-
wouldn't you if you've got a 25-litre keg sitting there doing nothing that you didn't make the beer in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he didn't have that many dry days.
Takes a while to get used to having beer on tap, doesn't it?
It
That's right,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, we can all get excited.
What is it? It's normally 9 steps into the 12-step program before you get used to it, isn't it?
You have to
So,
try and-
right. I'm only trying to hurry this one along because I'm currently in a lot of pain at the moment.
Cool.
So I'm tittered off my bollocks on painkillers at the moment, and CBD and beer and life and the general wonderment of the company of these 3 fine human beings. So, what are you drinking, Tricky?
I have got a West Coast Pilsner that I've made with what's this got in it? SARS, Talus, and Artenum hops in there. So pretty standard kind of Pilsner base, and then a sort of West Coast-ish style kind of late hopping and dry hop. It's come out all right. It's got quite a lot of kind of spicy, sort of herbal SARS flavor. I think maybe the Talus is adding a little bit to that as well. And then a kind of real sort of zesty, crisp kind of grapefruity thing at the end. It's not crazy hoppy, so it's not quite your kind of full on IPA sort of hoppiness and so on, but it's definitely got quite a bit of aroma and flavor from those hops. So yeah, it's good. Might tweak the recipe a little bit next time, but it's not bad for a first attempt. Quite happy with it.
Outstanding.
Nice.
Owen, what you got?
Good evening. I am drinking none other than a Hazy Days Brewery Imperial Stout.
Cool.
Well, shit, you're starting off little then.
Well, this is the high gravity brewing episode. It'd be rude not to be
I see
drinking a
Owen's,
few
making
impies,
sure
right?
that he gets absolutely shit-faced on this one.
It'd
Excellent.
be rude not to be utterly trolleyed and sliding underneath the door at 40 minutes of a 3-hour episode.
Yep. Yep.
Is it a good
So,
one?
It's nice. It's an 11.4% Imperial Stout. It was bottled December 20. It is cacao nibs, oak chips, bourbon, coffee, and maple.
Mm.
And it is delightful. It's quite sweet. It's a pretty sweet beer. But you pick up the bourbon, you pick up the coffee, you get the sweetness of the maple. I'm not getting a huge amount of oak on the nose, but definitely there in the taste. Beautifully balanced. Very little alcohol burn on the beer. Far too easy drinking for 11.5%.
Timmy
And
does them well, doesn't he?
the kicker is it's a 500ml bottle. So
Well, hey!
good luck to me.
Yeah.
You're going to need more than luck, Chief.
I'm actually double parked. I'm also drinking my triple fruited Goza. So this was my warm-up beer. I can see I didn't get too far into the warm-up beer. But this is a 3.6% triple fruited Goza made with peach, mango, and passion fruit. And obviously it is it Goza or Goes? How do you pronounce that style?
Goes.
Is it Goes?
Goes.
I think I usually say goes.
Goes. It's a
Goes.
Goes. And I apologise to any Germans listening
I
for
might be wrong.
mispronunciating that style. But yeah, it's a little bit salty. I went a little bit less salt than I probably should have. Only that I felt like I could add more if it wasn't salty enough. But yeah, really pleased with it. It's super drinkable. If there is any summer left on the British Isles, then I'll enjoy this. But otherwise, I think quite a lot of it's going out in beer mails.
Cool.
Excellent.
Outstanding. That's exactly what we want.
He's well known for his Neepers, is Mr. Timmy Jenkins, but he can knock out a fucking good Zimpy as well, can't he?
The rum and raisin one was utterly fantastic.
I've had a few. I think he makes. Does he make one a year? More or less.
Maybe
a couple a year.
But yeah.
Makes a couple a year. I think I've had most of them.
Are you boys planning
last
anything like that just now? You guys got anything in the works for a?
I'm gonna rebrew Hokum Stomp,
okay.
which I know it's not really imperial as such.
Yeah.
I'm also gonna think about rebrewing the McKellar Beer Geek Breakfast Stout, which is technically an MP at 8%. Other than that,
yeah, I've had a long-standing plan to attempt a kind of imperial peanut butter stout, but yeah, I'm not still not any closer to actually giving it a go. So
yeah,
soon, someday.
I have to admit that just sounds utterly rank.
well, I like it.
I'm going to say it how I see it.
I like a chocolate peanut stout.
Chocolate and peanut, no problem. Peanut butter, get in the water. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
peanut butter in a beer.
That's the flavouring that they use for all peanut flavoured beers is peanut butter flavouring. To be fair, Chris. So
yeah, well, I'd put actual peanuts in there.
Okay.
It might block your dip tube, but you know, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, Andy,
So
what you got?
You're gonna dip your nuts in there, yeah?
I dip my nuts in everything, mate. If you've had a beer mail off me, you've had a beer that's had my nuts in it.
Lovely.
Big sweaty. Is that what gives it that extra saltiness?
It's the tang, mate. It's all about the tang.
The astringency comes from the tea bags.
That's the one. That's the one.
Cool. So I've got a beer from Andy Clark that he sent me. So Holly Lake Brew Co. He sent me an Impy Stout called Fred 2021 vintage. It is. I don't know if you see my face when I took the first sip. It is sexual, like that. It's
oh dear.
chocolate. It's big. What is it? 9.5%. Very. Like Owen, you says it yours kind of was sweet. Mine's feels a bit sweet, but then the bitterness just balances it out perfect. So it says here it's Magnum for bittering. It just seems to just give you that. It dries your mouth a little bit and then just makes you want to go back in for more. It's nice and big and really smooth. It's not kind of got any of that alcoholic burn or anything.
That's an interesting point you make there, Andy. Perhaps we ought to mention that later.
Yeah, we should. But this has got cacao nibs, soaked in bourbon, 2 shots of espresso, soft maplewood keg edition. It was funny you were saying about you couldn't taste is it the oak? Oh, this is maple wood, so it should be like a sweet. Well,
Mm.
Sweet and smoky.
Ooh. I don't think I'm getting any smoky, but it is very kind of. The whole thing's just super sweet, in a sense of, just being so big, chocolatey. It's epic. I don't know about. I'm not getting that much coffee. Coffee thing's not really coming through.
I think Chris just read the comment that I did as well in the chat.
Peter Byers, you absolute legend. Oh, get it. Yeah, and for those of you who are listening to this after Tricky's done lots of editing, Peter Byers has just put in the YouTube chat comments, now we know what killed the badger. He had a nut allergy. Outstanding work, Peter. Comments of the episode so far.
And
Look.
Yeast suggested peanut butter and chili.
That's just a bit weird.
Guys, how good was Luke's post today on Homebrew UK?
I don't know. I've not been on Homebrew
badger.
UK. Did it get deleted?
You saw the picture though, because he put it in the,
I saw the video of the badger
That's
toy.
it,
yeah,
that's
he basically
it.
posted that same thing in the Homebrew
Get
UK
it.
forum.
Basically asking, do you think it's infected?
Oh, Luke Stevens, you legend.
Oh, I missed it. I want to
was
see.
a-
It was a bag
Legend.
of caster sugar, actual bag in it. There was a fluffy toy badger floating. What was the thing at the bottom?
You know what got me the most was that the badger was in a hot bag. He'd bagged the badger.
Bags the badger.
It's the little
Outstanding
touches
work.
like that really made it for me.
Oh, you're gonna love him.
I
aren't you?
missed this. Oh, it's
Top-
Luke's
top.
video.
Top notch.
I'll have a look in a bit. That's brilliant.
For
Yeah.
anyone who's wondering what the fuck we're talking about right now, there's a
Stay
bit of a
tuned
long-
because we'll be talking about
Well,
it
yeah.
later.
But there's a long-standing joke about dodgy
badgers.
infected brew pictures on Facebook that look like they've got dead badgers floating in them. So yeah,
It's all about the badger.
Did a bit
All
of a
about
spoof
the badger.
post based on that.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. So, you rate your beer, do you, Andy?
Oh, mate, it is awesome.
I mean, we can't actually see your face because of that shit lighting, but you know. Yeah. So Owen's enjoying his beers. Tricky seems to be enjoying his beer. Andy's very much enjoying his beer. And I'm just marveling at the clarity of this beer. Check that out. Even if I remove the condensation.
Now, Chris, is this yours?
Yes. That is my Märzen.
Oh, wow.
And it has
okay.
just
A medicine?
It
No
has,
way.
it has just reached peak lagering.
Superb.
I mean, peak
Yeah, I can see it.
clarity. The flavors on point. Look at the lacing. Can't
Yeah.
argue with the lacing.
Oh, that does look rather good.
It's peach. It's absolutely banging. And BML coming soon, boys. That's all I'll say. BML coming soon. So, yeah, really nice beer. Those of you who've listened to the podcast for more than 8 seconds will know that I do love a Märzen. This is a slightly modified recipe from the original, but it is still an utter banger. And yes, I am very much enjoying a pint of the Märzen. I've just had a can of Vacant Gesture, which when I stopped vaping quite so much, actually tasted quite a lot of mango.
Funny that.
Yeah, it's weird how that works, isn't it? Especially since this is a mango-y liquid.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice. 2 really nice beers. Very, very pleasant. And that that Märzen's going to last me quite a while now. Unless you want me jabbering on about fucking walls closing in and trees chasing me and shit.
Yes, let's do it.
No, let's not. So, I'm going to roll this one to Tricky. Tricky, would you mind setting the scene for us? Get the notes open, you bearded cockwomble.
Where's the notes? Where's the notes?
Set the scene.
Okay, so I guess first of all, if we're going to start talking about high gravity beers, we need to give you a little bit of a definition of where we're setting that kind of crossover point between what we consider high gravity and sort of standard or normal gravity brewing. Now, there is no official line of demarcation for this, but for the purpose of this episode, we'll be talking about stuff sort of above kind of 1070-ish. So you're looking at your kind of bigger IPAs, kind of double IPAs and beyond, really. So as Chris mentioned at the start of the episode, dippers, impies, your kind of stronger Belgian beers, old ales, I guess, will come into that as well in certain circumstances, triple IPAs, etc., etc., etc. All the strong shit that will melt your face if you have too many of them, basically. So yeah, kind of 1070-ish gravity, and I guess sort of 7.5% and upwards in terms of the actual finished ABV. And why do we need to talk about high gravity brewing specifically? Basically, because it will affect lots of things to do with your brew day and also how the beer actually ferments out and the performance of your yeast and all the other stuff that's really kind of key to producing a good beer. So there's lots of things that you need to factor into that, because essentially you are giving your yeast quite a challenge. You're also creating a bit of a challenge in terms of extracting the amount of sugar that you need to achieve those higher gravities. And all of those things will lead to considerations you need to apply in terms of your brewing process and how you basically set up your fermentation so that you give the yeast the best opportunity to successfully complete its fermentation and achieve the final gravity you want to get to. How's that for a little warm up?
That weren't too
Right.
bad. Can I
was
do
nice.
science shit now?
Do science.
I'll do science.
Everyone else sit back and relax.
Okay. Every time I say soft
Drop
southern
in.
Jesse, shandy drinker, etc., etc., everybody's got to finish their beer. So, what is actually meant by gravity in brewing? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who don't know. They just think it's like gravity, like normal gravity.
It's how fast you fall over after you've drunk it.
That is obviously at 9.63 meters per second. However, or is it 9.8, 9.86?
Is that regardless of the OG of the beer, Chris?
Yes, because gravity doesn't actually affect you. Fall over at
You learn a new thing every day, don't you?
At a specific acceleration, and it's 9.8 meters per second is your acceleration rate. Anyway, so what is actually meant by gravity in brewing? Well, you are talking about something called specific gravity. Now, for those of you who are sitting at the back chewing gum and aiming, staples at the girl sat in front of you, or twanging bras, or generally just tossing it off at school during chemistry when you should have been listening, because it's the most important thing in the world. Specific gravity is a fairly simple concept to grasp. Imagine you have a small block, right? And it is 1 centimeter tall, 1 centimeter wide, and 1 centimeter deep. It is a 1 cubic centimeter chunk of something, okay? Water at a certain temperature and at normal atmospheric pressure has a specific gravity of 1. So 1 centimeter cubed weighs 1 gram. And that is the basis off of which everything else is read. Now, in order to increase the specific gravity, you have to put more stuff inside that 1 centimeter cube. By dissolving sugar, which sits between the hydrogen and oxygen bonds of the dissociated water molecules, you can get more stuff within that same square centimeter. So it may not weigh 1 gram, it may weigh 1.070 grams.
Is that why Timmy's beers are always so heavy?
That's because he's put half a fucking neutron star in his beers, mate. That's why that is. It's essentially the more stuff you have per square centimeter, specific matter. As long as if you have more stuff, then you end up with a higher gravity. And if you have less stuff, i.e. something that weighs less or has a lower density, because that's ultimately what you're talking about here, density, that will weigh less. So alcohol has a lower specific gravity than water, which means as the sugar gets turned into alcohol, the specific gravity goes down. And if you drink wine or turbo cider or, Badger fermentation mediated imperial wherries, you can end up at like 0.995, which means each square centimeter weighs less than 1 gram. And that's all we're talking about when we're talking about gravity in brewing. It's got very little. I mean, obviously, as Tricky says, it's to do with the rate at which you fall over when you're drinking impy stouts. But the reality is it's more to do with how much stuff and what that stuff weighs and the density of 1 cubic centimeter of that particular solution, solute, stuff, solid, gas, whatever.
So it's kind of in the name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Gravity.
So that is what your hydrometer, and effectively is kind of the way in which it floats is representing the density of the liquid.
Exactly right, yes.
And but equally, could you weigh it?
You could, which I think personally would be an interesting thing to do if anybody's had one of Timmy's beers, would be to take a bottle of a Timmy Nipah and then take a bottle of water and weigh them. And I will absolutely 150% guarantee you that Timmy's Nipah will weigh probably 1.2 times as much. Literally the heaviest beers I've ever touched in my life. And that's all it comes down to, the density of the liquid, the specific gravity of the liquid.
So what's the weight of pure alcohol? What's the specific gravity of just pure alcohol?
I've got no idea. I've never actually looked that one up.
It will be lighter, won't it? Because it's
it is lighter, but how much lighter? Let's find out.
Good question. Also, another important question is how much does a Badger add?
Well, I mean, it depends a lot on whether or not the Badger was run over by a car, whether it died of natural causes, whether you shot it.
A nut allergy?
Whether it died of a nut allergy, yeah, that's true.
You're certainly going to see an increase in your dissolved solids, but yeah, lots of variables there, Owen, I think, to consider.
No.
Specific gravity of ethanol or ethyl alcohol at 25 degrees Celsius is 0.787. Might be an idea for you guys who are like, serious whiskey nerds to maybe measure out 100 mils of whiskey and see what the specific gravity of your whiskey is.
Sounds like a plan.
I mean, it sounds like I'd end up having to drink 100 mils of whiskey, but never mind.
It's only 4 shots.
Could be worse. Could be one of Chris's teabag beers.
Yeah. Right then. So we've done that. Andy, take us through the brew day. Take us through the... Oh, really? Is how unprepared are you, motherfuckers? What the... Oh, I am working with absolute fucking amateurs.
We were just expecting you to talk for the whole 3 hours while we got drunk.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
I'm on an impy. I'm already starting to glaze over here.
Owen, do you want to help me out? Because I know you can handle
Andy's already in the after party, Chris.
Yeah, I'm like,
fuck this noise. Let's get
what's this? Efficiency factor. Oh yeah, so your efficiency on your actual brew.
So these are the main things that brewing a high gravity beer will affect as far as your brew day goes.
Yeah.
The things that people really need to talk about and think about. The meat and potatoes.
Yeah, so the first one is your brew house efficiency will probably plummet because you're trying to shove more grains into your mash tun, but then also you don't have that same volume of water that is kind of flowing through it. You've got the same amount of water but more grain, so it's harder to wash the grains. So what's going to happen is you're just not going to extract as many sugars as you would per kilo, as normal for a kind of a lower ABV beer. So it's a constant battle as you're trying to obviously extract as much sugar as you can. Now, what we were talking before was iterated mashing. So that's where you can fill up your mash tun with grains, and then effectively once you've you can then hook the grains out of that and then put in fresh grains again, so you can almost like a kind of double mash as such.
So
is another
effectively,
thing.
you're effectively mashing with instead of water, you're then mashing a second time with the runnings from the first mash.
The first runnings,
Yeah.
which I think sounds an absolute nightmare, to be fair, because you're going to be pulling out. You have to have a brew in a bag system type thing where you can pull them out. It's probably not going to fit for someone that's got a 3-pot system as such, because you're going to have to then transfer all your water out and then dig out your mash tun and then put in fresh grains and all that sort of nonsense. So
yeah, I think all-in-one systems or brew in the bag, that's where it's popular. I think 3-vessel systems, it's just going to be a pain in the arse in terms of sort of running off, having to run dig out your mash tun, as you said, run all of the runnings back into the mash tun, get it back up to temp, so you'd expect to be adding at least an hour, if not an hour and a half to your brew day, right?
So if you're going to be running a 3-pot system, then really what you want to be doing is a no sparge type. So effectively you take your first runnings and then that then gives you that higher concentration, but you're going to have to, based on your system, you're going to have to then take a lesser amount, which is probably not the worst thing when you're brewing these types of beers, because I don't know if you're wanting, crazy amounts of it as such. It depends, because unless you're giving a lot of it away, to be fair, then it might be a little bit easier. Maybe you're doing it for Christmas and you're giving it out as gifts to family, to your brewing friends, that sort of thing. Us on the podcast, obviously.
Could you not? Sorry to butt in, but I've just had a thought. Could you not simply remove the iterated mashing and increase the gravity of your wort by simply not sparging?
That's what we're saying.
And simply just take your first run in. So like Party Guile Brewing.
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, so no sparge.
Yeah. But if you look at it specifically, no sparge is kind of misleading, because a lot of people, when they assume no sparge, they assume that you're mashing in at full volume. So if you were to do
that's a good shout.
As if you were to just do your normal mash, and then instead of bothering with the sparge, or even sparge half as much, and then just simply, wash out what's left in there, but at the same time, you're getting all of those wonderful, beautiful, sweet sugars out of your first run-in. So you're going to end up with a much, much, much higher starting gravity. I'd imagine if you were aiming for an 8% beer, and I know this for a fact, I've got a fucking conversion factor that tells me this. If you were aiming for an 8% beer and you only took your first run-ins from your mash with no sparge, you'd end up with a final gravity of 1.120.
So that's mega.
And that's assuming 70% efficiency.
So mega.
I mean, that's pretty amazing, that. And then you could still afford to sparge with half the amount and still end up with a pre-boil of maybe 1090.
Yeah. I think it comes down to the size of your mash tun as well. How much grain can you get in? And then also, it's because the amount of water increases with the amount of grain so that you can get that right consistency. But then your sparge volume then comes down. So that's where your efficiencies all get lost, because you're not rinsing your grains enough.
You can offset that to an extent with a longer boil, can't you? So you can basically increase your overall volume and therefore give you more sparge water to go through. So it's one way that you can.
That's a very good
idea. And actually, we didn't really touch on that when we talked earlier in the week when we put the notes together. But actually, that's a really, really important point in terms of being a popular method when making high gravity beers is actually boiling for 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, because then it also adds that additional depth of flavor, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Maillard reaction,
Maillard reaction,
Yeah.
right?
Especially for homebrewing, where you might be struggling to get those, as your efficiency sort of nosedives, as we were talking about, you might reach a point where you're really just not going to get any higher unless you do boil it down further and sort of concentrate the work that way, as opposed to trying to do it through the mash itself.
Yeah, obviously a longer mash is another option as well, right? You're just hoping for greater conversion, just giving, especially if your water to grain ratio is that bit lower, you're just allowing the enzymes to work for a bit longer. But I think my experience, you do end up seeing a pretty big efficiency loss. But as you said, if we end up, almost taking like a party guile, sort of just taking the first runnings approach, if you sort of offset that with your volumes in your mash tun, sort of knowing full well that you're only going to be taking the first runnings and increase the volume of water and the grain, then that's another way of kind of ensuring that you just get a super concentrated running,
I think that's the way. I mean, I've talked about the trampagne I did for the father-in-law, and that was the way that I did it the second time around. I literally just took the first run-ins to make the trampagne. It was the only way that I could get anywhere near it. It was very, very difficult. Now, one thing that we need to bring in at this particular point, I'm sorry, Owen, I'm going to jump in before you have a chance to jump on a point, but one thing that, goddamn insects. So the one thing that I do want to talk about at this point is something which is quite important, which is the saturation point of sugar, specifically maltose, in a solution. Okay? Now, don't think that just because you're putting loads of grain in, you are saturating that solution. You are nowhere near saturating that solution, because at 20 degrees C, you can dissolve 2 kilos of sugar in 1 liter of water. And I will tell you right now, you are not getting 2 kilos of sugar out of 8 kilos of grain.
No
and
chance.
even if you are, you've got 20 odd liters of water. So I wouldn't even worry about reaching the saturation point of that. And we did some maths, and I looked up some charts and stuff, and you can get a hell of a lot of sugar into that water at 80 degrees or 70 degrees or 67 degrees or whatever it is that you're mashing at. So don't think that you're reaching a saturation point. What you're reaching is a point of diminishing returns. That's what you're reaching. You're reaching a solubility plateau. I had a conversation with a double PhD in chemistry about this, and I'll talk about the other thing that I spoke to him about later on. But he said there is literally no chance that you are hitting a saturation point. More likely, what you're hitting is a point at which you're not moving the water enough, and it's not hitting the right point, and the enzymes haven't worked right. He said what you're more likely hitting is a solubility plateau and an enzymic activity plateau. So you're not running out of saturation, solubility points within your solution to be able to dissolve all that sweet sugar, as everybody says, because you're really nowhere near saturation point.
There are probably a few other things going on there, though, that are kind of affecting that curve that you're talking about.
Like, absolutely, yeah.
The viscosity of the liquid and all this kind of stuff is, like you say, going to slow the transfer or transit of the liquid through your mash. And it's not going to be saturated, but it's going to become gradually harder to dissolve more sugar into it as it becomes, as the gravity goes up, I suppose.
I think when you're doing that, was it 2 kilos per litre? Sounds like you're going to be making some Scottish tablet, to be fair.
To be fair, mate, I think what we're making there is prison hooch. It's one of those wonderful things, though, isn't it?
Top recipe.
Or a standard homebrew UK wherry. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing when you start looking at chemistry in this way. And I know most people who are listening to this are like, oh, fucking hell, Chris is banging on about chemistry. I know you three guys are. But the point is, it's interesting to see there will be somebody on a forum somewhere saying, oh, you're running out of solubility, you can't dissolve that much sugar. And you fucking can. I've made saturated sucrose solutions before for experiments that I've been doing with basically dehydrating potatoes. And I've dissolved so much sucrose in water. And it comes out and it's horrible stuff, and you touch it and it crystallizes on your fingers, and you drop one drop of it on a table and don't notice it for 5 minutes. You come back and there's a little fucking crystallized pyramid of sugar. It's phenomenal stuff. Super saturated solutions are amazing. However, you are nowhere near the saturation point. But like Tricky says, there's other things coming into it. There's other things that are affecting that. And the most likely factor is you're having issues with the conversion as opposed to the actual solubility. And that's all I wanted to point out. However, the next point on the list is quite interesting because increasing your temperature increases the saturation level. And that's a simple energy in a reaction thing. That's just everybody knows about that. I don't need to explain energy of reaction, surely.
No.
Yep, that's cool. Right.
But that then kind of informs why we, sparge at higher temperature and things like that, because it makes it easier to rinse the sugars out.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about the things that you can do to counteract the diminishing returns from your mash when you're trying to do a high gravity brew. So we've already mentioned doing a longer boil. What else can you do to sort of help with that in terms of getting the best possible efficiency when you are trying to get the higher gravity out?
I'll be honest. For me personally, and we never spoke about this very much on Thursday when we did the notes, but the thing that I always do is I go, well, I know my efficiency is going to be shit, so I'm going to plug 65 into my software and move on from there.
Yeah. Just a bit more grain,
Just
to be honest.
It's a quid, people. It's a fucking quid. Just
Unless
put the grain in.
Unless it's Weatherman Bohemian Pilsner floor
and then it's £2. It's £2 then people.
Then it's £5.
£18 per
well, yeah.
kilo.
So I guess just be aware that it's going to drop your efficiency down and adjust your recipe is the easiest solution, isn't it? Rather than worrying too much about changing your process around.
Everybody talks about things like lowering your mash temperature, get more conversion to the simpler sugars. They talk about, like we've just said, you target your final gravity. Your efficiency is going to be shit. I'm aiming for 1094 as my starting gravity. So I'm just going to put in 62 or 60% efficiency and take it from there. And if I'm slightly over, whoop-de-doo, I've got a stronger beer. I'm trying to get munted on this one anyway, so who cares? But the other thing that you need to make sure that you understand is measure your starting gravity for your boil, okay? Because there's a really good chance with a beer like this that you are going to have to adjust your hop schedule. Because if your SG is, or your pre-boil gravity, whatever you want to call it, if your pre-boil gravity is 8 points higher, you need to adjust your bitterness. You need to get that.
It'll be too sweet.
You need to get that boogo in, because otherwise you're going to end up with a massively cloying beer. It's going to be crap. Nobody's going to want to drink it, and you're going to be sat with 23 litres of a 14% sweet as fuck impy stout for Christmas, and nobody wants that.
This is probably one that's for more of a recipe development where you would probably do iterations of it to like dial it in. I don't think anyone would probably hit the nail on the head.
Iterations of a 12% beer.
Yeah, but how can you dial that one in? Maybe it's every year you do it, and it's
absolutely
just to tweak it, sort of thing. But
I only know one person.
Be very hard.
I only know one person who brews 11% beers on the regular, and that's Brett Harmon. I only know that one man. I mean, I know
Maybe
Owen
just ask Brett for a recipe and
Yeah, just go
Get
with
away.
that.
Yeah, just go with that. Thanks.
Owen has 9% beers on his cornflakes, but that's stuff normally that he's bought. You're very quiet, Owen.
Occasionally.
Yeah, you're very quiet, mate.
I'm just having a few C drive issues,
Oh.
which is affecting Audacity. So I'm just trying to fix a few things in flight.
Well,
so I apologise if I'm.
I'll
going
tell you what
quiet.
I'll do, Owen. I'm going to send you a 2 terabyte drive to stick in your machine. All right.
Okay.
All right. I've got a few spares. We're golden.
Brilliant.
So just coming back to the mash temps thing that we mentioned, I think another thing to talk about there is sometimes people have the tendency to go, oh, we want a high finishing gravity on the bigger beers because you want that sort of body and full flavor and a bit of sweetness and whatever, and that can sometimes lead them to going for quite a high mash temp. And I think actually, sometimes slightly counterintuitively, you probably want to go more the other way because you can have such a large amount of residual sugar in there anyway, especially if you're right up at the top end of your sort of high gravity beers and stuff, that you want to give the yeast a bit of a helping hand in terms of being able to actually reach terminal gravity by not putting too many complex sugars into the work that it's going to have to chew through. So, if you think about your yeast sort of getting towards the last few percent and then it's coming up against the more difficult to break down sugars, that's where you might end up having issues with stuck fermentations and things like that. So quite often, not necessarily going super low, but lower mash temperatures can sometimes be helpful for getting those, not just to get the final gravity down a bit, but to enable or help the yeast just to finish out basically, so it's not having to work too hard.
Do you not think that having that much grain, and even if you're mashing for an hour, that at the end of that hour, and specifically if it's a dark beer, do you not think that there's going to be enough long chain sugars there to give you the body, as well as it being 10%, and that 10% alcohol adding a shitload of body anyway?
Yep.
Do you not think that maybe, I'm talking to the general populace, not to you three, because I know you three know this, but do you not think that's going to add a shitload of body to your beer anyway? So maybe mashing at 65, 65.5, 65.8, whatever, maybe that's going to give you a better, more drinkable beer.
Yeah. You've got to consider your grist for a lot of, particularly, impy stouts and things like that. You're going to have a lot of speciality malts in there and, caramel malts and things like that are going to give you, complex sugars anyway, kind of regardless of your mash temperature. So, you don't necessarily need to be worrying about that through higher temperature mashing, I would say.
Now, we do have to come on to something here which is going to be a bit of a sticking point for me, but I'm not in the mood to have a rant. So I'm just going to sit here and drink beer. Can somebody please cover off that last point?
Any volunteers?
So that's pH.
We're talking about pH.
Yeah.
So, right. Okay. Well, I guess there's a factor in terms of just broadly speaking, pH being important to efficiency, right? So measuring your mash pH, ensuring that is within the appropriate range for enzyme activity that is necessary for conversion. But there are certain considerations in terms of, I guess, broadly speaking, whether you're making a dark high gravity beer or a lighter high gravity beer, or whether it's a more hop forward style or a more malty style, as you may choose to kind of adjust within that range. So for hoppy styles, you'd be wanting to target more the lower range at 5.2. If you're going for a more malty style, then you would want to perhaps target a slightly higher range, maybe 5.5, 5.6. And that just helps to avoid the risk of astringency from the darker malts, particularly if you're brewing stouts, impy stouts, that sort of thing. And it will just bring the presence of the intended beer style to the fore. So I don't know if I've covered all the points there, but What are your thoughts, guys?
I think that pretty much covers it, to be honest. Yeah, I wouldn't have anything else to add to that, really.
Did we say? Sorry, Owen. Did you talk about the dark malts making? You just need to watch because if it's light malts, then obviously your pH, you might need to actually do some buffering with it with some acid. But then obviously, if it's darker malts, you might actually find you go the other way and you end up in, I don't know, 4.8 or something pH.
Yeah.
So it's a case of what would you? Is it slaked lime or something like that you would use?
You can use
remember.
bicarbonate of soda.
Bicarb.
Yeah, just to increase your carbonates in there.
Yeah.
Basically, add your hardness back into the water.
I literally I always need to add acid just because of the soft water. So it's a case of always having to, when you do a dark beer, it's maybe you don't need to put anything in, to be honest, and it just hits it nicely at the 5.2. But generally, any kind of lagers or anything like that, you have to add acid.
Just depends on your starting point, doesn't it? I mean, like my water out the tap here, I would use that straight for dark beers because it's got so much buffering capacity in it already that
Thanks, Tricky.
there's no chance that it's going to push the pH anywhere near 5. It's always going to be in the sort of mid range of that area where you want it usually. It's only for me it's the other end where it's the paler beers that I have to get involved with acids or using RO water.
Yeah, I mean I tend to favour using my tap water or a dilution of my tap water with RO. Thank God for the dilution section of Brewfather, which has come in super handy. I'm sure anyone else has used that.
It's brilliant.
It is excellent. Because the tap water here, where it's so hard, is absolutely excellent for making dark styles of beer, and I rarely have to worry about under or overshooting my pH or undershooting it going too low below the range I'm looking for. So it's a handy way of doing it. You probably struggle a bit though, don't you, Andy, with your water?
The dark beers I've done actually, they've came bang on 5.2. Generally, it's when you do the pilsners etc. It ends up at 5.8, 5. Yeah, pretty much. It's weird. So I always need to add acid to try and get it down into the 5.2 with my tap water.
For those of you listening at the moment, listening live, that noise that you can hear in the background at Andy's house, that's his new toy. And yes, it is a triple high-speed anal vibrate. Sorry, no, it's a glycol chiller, isn't it, Andy?
Sorry, I keep trying to slide down the mic when I'm not talking. I'm trying to kill it because it's like it's like a jet engine running in the background.
Yeah, I did think you seemed a bit cheery this evening, Andy.
Yeah, the Sucktron 3000 is working well for you then.
The Thai Lady Boytronic.
I've put some, so it could be louder. If you want me to turn it up a wee bit, I can just pull it away. I've put some cushions around it to try and muffle the noise off the damn thing. But
you're gonna have to build a fucking soundproof room to put it in, fella.
I can see my audio like when it goes bass, like just straight. You can see like hundreds of noise. I'm just like, oh. That's going to be horrendous.
Don't worry about it. Tricky's editing this one. So,
are we going to edit this?
I think.
Let's see how Audacity works out for these guys first.
Mine's fine, by the way. Mine's absolutely solid now. I'm not typing anything, and it's completely minimized. The thing about pH is it is quite an important thing to take into account with your dark and your light beers, your hoppy beers versus your malty beers, because pH does help yeast do their thing. Okay, yeast like a pH acidic, not massively acidic, but there's a reason why you can wash them with phosphoric acid. They're not really all that bothered, but it's one of them things where you can really change your yeast's ability to metabolize by changing the pH and hence changing the tertiary structure of the proteins for the enzymes. So you can really kind of screw the yeast up by having it too acidic or too basic. Too alkaline for those of you who aren't, whatever. It's one of them wonderful things. So monitoring your pH, even monitoring the pH of your beer during fermentation, when you take a gravity sample, it's important to be able to monitor it then. If you're going down the route of a super massive beer, if you're trying to produce something at 11, 12, 12.5%, which I've done, Tricky's done, we've all done it, I'm pretty sure. Andy does it all the time because it's called Buckfast. But it's one of them wonderful things where you have to monitor it. It is important, but at the same time, there are other factors that affect that pH, and you need to take those into account as well, especially if you're trying to get optimum yeast health, optimum flavor, optimum bugu, optimum sort of final flavor and all that kind of stuff. It is important. So there we go. Owen, do you want to introduce the next section? Do it in your sexy voice.
So we have decided to add a new section to the podcast going forwards, and that is songs that we collectively, or not even collectively, individually like to brew to. So this is going to be a repeating section of the podcast with the intent that we have now set up a Spotify playlist, and we are going to add a song each to that playlist each podcast, and the idea being that you guys, if you want to, you can go and play that playlist when you brew. We'll have to see how good it turns out. It could be an absolute
I've got a screamer today.
pile of turd. So let's kick it off. So Tricky, what's your what's this week's favourite song to brew to?
So I've decided to go for, when I'm brewing, sometimes I'll be in an angry brewing mood, and I'll go for something maybe a little bit more rocky, or maybe a little bit more aggressive. But when I'm having a nice chilled brew day, I tend to like to go for
He's going to say Celine Dion.
Yeah, nice, easy listening, bit of Celine Dion, lounge jazz, that sort of thing. No.
Enya. Do you like a bit of Enya?
No,
sail away.
My wife is into Enya. I have been tormented with Enya for many years, actually. But no, I like a bit of trip hop to listen to, and I'm having a nice relaxed brew day. So I'm going to go with Unfinished Sympathy by Massive Attack as my first entry for the list.
Good choice.
Mate, I got to admit, that's a banger of a shout. That is Tricky. That's a good one.
In with a strong early entry there.
I mean, that's a clear 9 out of 10. That is. So
who's next?
Andy.
Which
song by Biffy Clyro is it?
It's not.
Oh, he psyched me out.
No. So today's brew tune was Torn by Natalie
Imbruglia.
Wow. I mean, I listened to that the other day, actually. A classic 90s
absolute
one-hit wonder.
It's a great song purely for the line. What is it?
Lying naked on the floor.
Lying naked on the floor. Banging. She can do that anytime she wants near me. She would have fit one, Natalie Imbruglia.
She was nice. A great Australian export.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that'll make it. That'll be amazing for the Spotify playlist.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm adding them live to the Spotify playlist. So for those of you who are searching for the Spotify playlist, it is called the Hop Edition Songs to Brew To. And you should be able to search for it. I think I've made it public. I'm gonna check, or somebody can check if you're on Spotify. But it is the Hop Edition Songs to Brew To. That's what the playlist is called.
I'm just laughing at Owen butchering Natalie Imbriglia's surname on the notes. She's in burglarator or something like that. In burglar.
Oh
I
man.
fixed it. I got it
It's
for you,
close,
mate.
it's
I got
close.
it
Don't get
for
me
you.
to say that. Don't get me to
That
say that.
looks a bit
Thanks,
better
Jesus.
now. That looks a bit better.
Natalie and
Glaswegians.
Burglar.
Natalie and
Try
Burger.
and get a Glaswegian to say purple burglar alarm.
Oh God!
Burglar.
Come on, Owen. What you got?
Right. I mean, this is like one of my all-time favorites to brew to, which is going to be All Night Long
Lionel
by
Richie.
Lionel Richie. Yeah, it's
Classic.
listen, it's a guilty pleasure from my childhood, but I fucking love that song.
It is a great song.
It's so you as well, Owen.
It is. It is. All night long.
Slightly ironic, I reckon.
Leads into some Barry White after that, and then that's the.
And then he
perfect playlist
finishes
for him.
everybody off with Marvin Gaye.
Marvin
Yes.
Gaye.
I
The
mean, to
happy
be fair,
ending from Owen.
boys, you've all been really strong with your choices this week, and I'm going to feel really bad for dropping mine in now, because there's probably going to be a couple of you who don't even know this
Megadeth.
song. It's not Megadeth. It is the famous, uplifting, fantastic song that is Magic Carpet Ride by Steppenwolf.
Oh no, that is a class choice there.
It
yeah.
Oh, I
is-
love that song. That is a great
It is a
song.
superb song that you can just have on in the background. It doesn't overtake your brain. The lyrics aren't complicated. It's never going to stop you or make you forget a hop edition, but it is an absolute banger of a tune. And Andy's trying to find it now so he can listen to it because he's never listened to that one. Tell you what, yeah, go on.
Love a bit of Steppenwolf.
Yeah, I know this.
There we go. Absolute banger. Great tune. And that is my first addition to the Hop Edition Songs to Brew To playlist, which is now available on Spotify. So if you want to go and subscribe to that,
that is a good shout, I must say.
it will be updated on a regular basis. Every episode that we do, 4 more songs will go on to that. And also, I'm going to open it up. So if you have an absolute banger, I'm going to choose 3 songs from any listener who wants to
Crew Wolves,
submit
get
those
Crew
songs
Wolves.
to us.
Yeah, I was going to say, Crew
Get
Wolf
Crew
has got
Wolves
an
on,
absolute banger.
He's got
on
Audio
the chat
Slave
already.
Mark,
Audio Slave Kachis.
what's he
Yes.
got? What's he got? Audio Slave Cochise. I mean, that's a banger. Eye of the Tiger. I mean, I understand
No.
it is a classic, but is it really a song to brew to?
Stewie's first suggestion, "I'm Too Sexy," is
I mean,
the winner
that is
there,
a good
definitely.
one. That is a good one. I mean, we're going to have some absolute bangers, won't we? We're going to have some absolute bangers
till
by
I
the time we get to it.
Yeah, wait till I start working my way through the YMCA back catalogue.
Deep Purple Highway Star. I mean,
Where I recognise Chris from.
you're very quiet, dude.
Yeah.
That's where I recognise Chris from. Did he used to be in Right Said Fred?
Yep, I was the one with the massive nipples. Oh yeah. You see, these are all great tunes, guys. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pick 3. Bring Me the Horizon by the House of Wolves. Jeez, we're going to have to go from this. We're going to get 3 extra. Oh, Slipknot Duality.
The Oasis Morning Glory.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Slipknot can do one.
Yeah.
Slipknot are fucking phenomenal. That's a
Slipknot can
great
do
shout.
one.
That's going on, Luke. I'm putting that one on for definite, just to annoy Owen.
No. Vetoed.
You can't. There's no rights of veto. You're just going to have to skip that song when you brew.
Well, there is now. No, I've just made up a new rule.
Okay. Fair enough. I'm not going to argue. Right then. So that's one of the new things that we're going to be doing on every episode is we're going to be picking songs to brew to. And these are songs which are going to go onto that playlist, the Hop Edition Songs to Brew To playlist. You need to get it searched for on Spotify and, add it and listen to those tunes whilst you're brewing and hopefully enjoy it. And I also like Toby Keith. I like Girls That Drink Beer as well. That's a great song. Almost as good as God Bless Texas by Little Texas. Watch the video, turn the music off. That's all I'm saying. Now, shall we move on to the next bit? Probably the most important part of brewing an impy. What do we reckon?
Yeast.
Tricky's in another dimension at the moment.
Oh, sorry, I've just gone down a music
Pay
rabbit
close
hole,
attention.
looking for tracks for the next.
He's in a YouTube hole.
Yeah, that's it.
Was that Prodigy?
What were we talking
Firestarter.
about?
Oh, take me to another dimension. Pay close attention.
Yeah,
To another dimension. Take my brain to another dimension.
outer space.
Pay
yeah.
cose attention. Yeah, space. Yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's a good one as well.
Into outer space.
Was that the Prodigy, really?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
Was
Prodigy.
it?
Yeah.
We're just going to add that one on.
Early album.
Owen's like, fuck that right of veto, bitch. I've got typing rights.
I've got the notes open.
Fuck you,
I've
motherfucker. I'll
documented it
type
now.
this shit on. Okay, so the next section that we're going to bang on about is we're going to talk about yeast. Because without yeast, you don't have beer. You simply have wort, and it all tastes like crap until such time as you've actually put yeast into it. So, what is, Andy, would you consider the single most important part about your yeast with a big beer?
Health, yeast health, cell count, big cell count, yeah, and health.
Yeah, good healthy pitch of yeast is key.
Yep.
Never skimp on your yeast when you're banging out a big one.
Yeah,
That's right. Big yeast starters.
Yes. And if you believe some of the brewing books that come from America, most of their yeast starters for Impy Stouts are like 48-litre starters. I've no idea how the fuck you're going to fit that in a 23-litre batch. But you've got to, because that's what they say in all the brew books. You could just do like a 2 or 3 stage starter to give you that nice big yeast pitch and still only pitch like, half a litre of actual liquid.
You could, Chris, pitch on a yeast cake. So you could do something that's like a kind of a light beer as such, and then you could pitch onto a yeast cake. Because normally that then
like you listened to the episode that we did on yeast, which was episode 4.
Well, it's just from my experience, Chris, obviously, because I've
never listened to
doing a lot
episode
of
4. Yeah. To be fair, it is a perfectly legitimate way to do it. If you brew a bitter or you brew like a standard 4%, 5% stout, and then all of a sudden you want to bang out an impy, you're going to use the same yeast. Just pitch it straight onto that yeast cake. Bang it straight on. It'll go off like a goddamn rocket. You know that those yeast are healthy. Throw in some yeast nutrient. Give them a bit of the right stuff. If it's the right yeast, you don't want a yeast which craps out at 7% if you're going to be brewing a 12%er. But a good healthy yeast, a nice big fresh starter, and make sure it's the right one. Make sure it can handle the alcohol level that you're aiming for.
Obviously, if we're using dry yeast as well, you might need to chuck in a few packets rather than just the one.
Don't be scared. 4 packs is often enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean try and make a start with that, but I think with the liquid yeast, especially, even for a standard strength brew, a lot of the liquid yeast packets, especially if they're not super fresh, you're going to be struggling to hit the cell count you want. When you go to a higher gravity beer, you're going to be nowhere near to that. So, there's aside from buying lots of packets of liquid yeast, which is going to be prohibitively expensive, there's no getting around the fact you're going to need to make a starter, basically, and a fairly substantial one.
Or in our particular case, we're literally starting it from a slant.
Yes.
Yes. Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, it's starting from like a few cells or like a.
So it's all right if I pitch my yeast just now.
Go pitch your yeast. Go.
That's it. Just hit 12 degrees, my lager. So
go pitch. It's fine.
Fire it in there.
Bye, Andy.
2 minutes.
See you later.
Bye. I tell you can't get the fucking staff these days, can you?
So getting the
See,
right yeast.
That's a nice, healthy pitch. Look at that.
That's a good pitch. I think going back to the point about the yeast cake, I mean, another option is just scooping up some of the slurry, because more often than not, you don't actually need anywhere near as much as what's actually in the yeast cake, but just taking some of the slurry that's just incredibly fresh.
A cup full of slurry is going to be...
That's going to be enough.
A decent sized pitch for most beers.
Yeah,
I think decent's an understatement there. What's with the flickering lights?
Dodgy electrics in my house.
And I think, when you consider how much, like when you looked at Andy's yeast star there, it was like kind of maybe 3/4 of a centimeter thick at the bottom. You're probably talking about a cup of actual slurry there, maybe even half a cup.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if you scoop up a jar of slurry and you're going to use it within a day or two, then that's a really good option. Choosing the right yeast, I don't think we can overlook that point of conversation. Like, we probably need to delve into that a little bit in terms of yeast selection being really critical to high gravity brewing. And it really depends on how big a beer you're trying to produce, right? So for some people, if they're trying to produce a beer that's incredibly big, what they might end up doing is using a particular yeast that is may crap out at 9 or 10%, and then they may add more yeast to finish it out. So Belgian styles typically might use, typically use like a champagne yeast
Some
to
of
help
them do, yeah.
finish out the beer, because they're more tolerant to higher alcohol levels. Kvike's pretty good for high alcohol levels. They're very tolerant to extremely high levels of alcohol, according to the information on the Lars's directory.
I think if you're going to go down the route of making a wort which is as massive as you're going to need for a big beer, and then you pitch one pack of SO4 and give it the praying hands and say, I really hope this is going to work. You're doing yourself a fucking disservice. You really are.
Good luck, sir.
You've got to understand that every single step along the way, when you're brewing a big beer, there are multiple places where you can and quite often will fall over if you're not prepared, okay? Brewing a big beer is literally a case of the 7 P's to success every single time. Prior preparation and planning prevents a piss poor performance. You have to plan every step of the way. Make sure you've got the right grain. Make sure you've got the right temperature. Make sure you've got the right pH. Make sure you've got the right mash volume. Make sure you're sparging right. Make sure that your mash out's correct. Make sure that you're boiling long enough. Make sure that your hops are right. And then when you've got that into the fermenter, you're going to pitch one pack of fucking SO4 or a jar of slurry from 8 months previous that's brown. What the fuck are you doing? Okay? That's like buying a brand spanking new petrol fucking M5 BMW and putting diesel in the bastard, right? You're not doing it right. Do it right. Make sure that you're getting it on and that you are putting the right stuff in there. You do not want a yeast that's going to crap out at 7% when you're trying to make an 11% beer. It ain't going to work. All right? You're fucking letting yourself and us down. And to be fair, if you do that, you can fuck off and listen to another podcast, all right? And take your fucking dead badgers with you.
Fair enough, Chris. Fair enough.
I think the Homebrew UK might be starting a podcast where they're just pitching a single packet of SO4.
That's been kept at room temperature for 2 years.
All very good points. I think a key one for those that use, or I'd imagine almost everyone uses brewing software, is there is always some kind of yeast viability calculators in there. Use those if you're going to be using some kind of liquid yeast or yeast slurry that you want to build up. Yeast pitch calculators, like all of those are absolutely essential tools to getting your pitch rate right. and particularly like Tricky mentioned about using a number of dry yeast packets. I always find it really useful to use those calculators to work out how many packets, or even actually how many grams of dry yeast that you actually need to pitch into the beer. And in particular, if you're going to be doing a high gravity lager, you actually need to be going 4 times the standard pitch rate of a
What do we normally go? We normally go
a low
double,
gravity
don't we?
ale. So it needs to be huge. It needs to be
Yeah.
twice that of what you would be putting into an imperial ale, because you're obviously fermenting at a lower temperature, unless of course you're going to ferment the beer under pressure, in which case you may not need to pitch quite as much yeast. But that's a whole different conversation, and perhaps you might like to check out our pressure fermentation episode. Does anyone remember what number that is?
No.
Nope.
No. So go search it on the Hop Edition .uk website.
Yes. I'm just adding some more banging tunes from the list to the Hop Edition podcast songs to brew to playlist on Spotify. I'm sorry. I knew this would happen. It happened to Tricky almost instantly. He's like, I must find more songs. I'm doing exactly the same thing now.
Get off.
Yeah,
off
come on,
YouTube,
get back
off
in the
Google,
zone. Get
off Spotify.
I'm sorry.
Open the notes back
I'm
up.
sorry.
Get back in.
No, the
Get
notes are
back in the
open.
fucking game, guys.
Fuck's sake,
You
I'm getting shit
amateurs.
So we're still talking about yeast, aren't we? I think. I mean, we've said
picked up his phone. Great.
we've said
I'm
it
still
many
listening.
times before. The yeast is fundamental to any beer, but I think what people just have to realise is in this case you're creating, as we said at the beginning, quite a difficult fermentation situation for your yeast with a big beer. So pitch rate, all those kinds of things are incredibly important, making sure that you're doing a big starter if you need to. And there's other things that you can factor into this as well. So you might want to consider using additional yeast nutrient to help the yeast along. That will just supplement what is in the wort already, and help to keep it nice and healthy through the full length of the fermentation, rather than to help to prevent things like stuck ferments again. And oxygenation of the wort as well, so that we've got enough oxygen in there for the yeast to successfully do that thing.
Grow. Other option.
Propagate.
That's a good word.
Olive oil.
Budding's the word.
Budding. Yeah.
You can also add olive oil should you desire, which I've found quite successful.
I remember you talking about that before.
Yeah.
Have you actually tried that yourself?
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
But especially because when I was when I was harvesting yeast and then putting it in, you could tell, seeing the tilt, you could tell it was just like, it wasn't as quick as it used to be. And then you put in some of this, you put olive oil in it, and it was just like, it'd take off again. You could see it was, big difference. Even if you don't feel like, even in your starter, you could put it in there as well.
It makes a massive difference, proper level of oxygenation. It really does. So, we've just had a question. Brett talking about what are ideal mash temps. We've just covered all of that, mate. That was before the songs to brew to. There is no real ideal mash temp. The bottom line is
63 to 65 or something, depending. You don't want too complex sugars at the end, because you don't want to be mashing at 67. But
at the same time, some people want a massively bodied beer, and if they want that massively bodied beer and they don't care about, well, actually, we won't talk about that. We won't talk about it too much because there's a load of stuff later on that we need to talk about as far as this. But yeah, I see where you're coming from, Brett, and there is no real ideal mash temp. But like Tricky quite rightly said, and I'm going to give props to Tricky on this one, sometimes mashing a little bit lower will actually give you a better beer. If you're putting 10% alcohol in, you're going to have plenty of body from that. There's no need to be mashing at 71 in order to get more body, because later on down the line, we're going to talk about something that may give you pause, let's say, when it comes to mashing at 68, 67.5, 69 or whatever. You don't want those too high a mash temps. There's something further on that we're going to talk about that's very, very important to it. So,
did you guys touch on oxygenation of the wort?
Yeah,
the,
we
or
literally
the wort.
Yeah, we
say.
talked about that, and then an olive oil trick as well.
Good.
Yeah.
So, who's going to introduce the next section?
So we want to talk
I think Andy
about.
should.
Go on, Andy. Go on.
Andy's brewing this, isn't he?
He's just brewed
nice
it.
new
He's
fermenter.
just brewed it just now.
What, the Imperial Wary kit?
The Imperial Wary kit. So for all the donkey raping shit eaters from Homebrew UK who are now listening to this podcast, okay,
How many bags?
How many bags of sugar can I add to my wary to make it banging?
Banging. Or can I brew it short as well? It's the other one.
Brew it short and add 8 kilos of like normal granulated sugar. Yeah.
And only ferment it with the half-dead packet of yeast that's in the kit.
Well, when you see people
You'll be
saying,
sweet.
I've brewed a lager. It's the best lager I've ever made. I added a packet of Demerara sugar and a kilo of
I saw that one. It was a kilo of dextrose and a kilo of Demerara.
You're like, fuck off! Is that going to be the best beef?
And like
ever drunk?
a lime or something, and threw a
Just
lime
the
in
one,
as well.
the one lime.
Just the one lime. I'm sure that's going to offset the kilo of Demerara sugar in there.
Just to take the edge off the shit.
I bet you if we tried that, how bad would it be? They'd be like, oh, this is amazing. Man. You know, sometimes homebrewers, and they're like, oh, this is the best beer I've ever brewed. And then you try it and you're like, holy fuck, what is that crazy off flavour that's going on?
Andy, I'm not sure if you've overlooked this, but the point, I think, of this part of the podcast is, when are you going to do that experiment? Because we all need to know.
When's it going in the Unitime?
When are you going to make the Imperial Wary in your 14-gallon stainless steel SS
It's purely
Brewtech
for that
fermenter.
post when it goes up on Homebrew UK with you tipping it into
the box. Put the box
expensive.
This has to be done. And more importantly, what you need to do, you need to get in touch with Luke Stevens and get him to send you the badger in a bag. Just so you can like hang it off your spunding valve. That
badger's going to be like a quake ring now. It's going to house yeast in it for future fermentations, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just dip the badger in, give it a little swirl around, and you're off and running, mate. It's
inoculated.
Yeah.
So Luke, can you start inoculating the badger,
around
please?
Everyone, so we can all add our own particular yeast strain to it.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Do it. This has to happen. This has to happen. Come on, Luke.
The reality of this particular section is, can you just add sugar? And yes, you can add sugar if you want zero body. Now, depending on which style of beer you are making, lots of Belgian beers have sugar added.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right, Chris.
Drier.
Yeah.
So you don't end up with a huge amount of
candy
body.
Sugar.
And you do end not so much candy sugar. A lot of them use just normal granulated table sugar. And that's because it adds alcohol without adding body.
Chris, a lot of the old school recipes for ales, you know, that the Orange Book or whatever, it was a camera one. A lot of those recipes had sugar.
Yeah, that's because nobody could get a decent mash efficiency.
That's because they're all using invert sugar.
I think, a lot of the English styles used inverted sugar. But actually, there is a lot of cases where adding sugar, and I know we joke about the whole Homebrew UK thing.
I love that group.
But actually, adding sugar, as Chris pointed out, is a classic pastime of Belgian brewing, because that actually is what the style kind of requires. But
drier beer.
Also it is, and we're broadly talking about how to push your ABV. I think you need to assess whether adding sugar is appropriate for the style that you're making, and it is ultimately going to increase alcohol. It's going to dry the beer out,
Smooth.
So perhaps, perhaps I don't know, an imperial pilsner, maybe that might have a case to say. Perhaps adding a bit of sugar might actually help in terms
The
of drying the
Trampagne
beer
did.
out.
The Trampagne did.
Yeah, but if you're brewing an imperial stout, then some people do add honey. They do add molasses. They do add dark sugars. Because
honey was one that
honey's a popular one.
Was it the Brooklyn Brew Shop? Those little kits, they used to always say to put honey in when you were bottling your beers for carbonation.
Yeah, that's a bit of a
went to go on a picnic. I'll pack a lunch. I'll pack a lunch.
That's a bit of a risky one with honey, because you can get a lot of like wild yeast and stuff in there. I've certainly seen a lot of stories before about people having issues with bottle bombs when they
I did have that issue.
Yeah.
Depends when you add it though, right? If you add it like 15 minutes,
if you chuck it in the boil,
you had to boil it. You had to boil it basically, and then mix it in. So that would kill anything. But
I think the aim there is they're using different forms of sugar, but ones that are likely to actually have a flavor contribution that are appropriate to the style of the beer, right? So, like, I know molasses, for example, is a good example for an imperial stout, because it's got such a dark, rich flavor that will ultimately kind of reside within the end product. You wouldn't want to add molasses to an imperial pilsner for obvious reasons, or
yeah.
There you go.
I think, as Chris was saying before, like a lot, when you get to the real top end of the ABV as well, the beer's still going to be thick and heavy and syrupy, even if you do put in a bit of sugar there, because just through the sheer, strength of the beer to start with and the amount of residual sugar you're going to have in there anyway. So, your sort of Belgian quads and things like that are probably going to have quite a bit of sugar in there to achieve those higher OGs and that finishing ABV, but they still drink pretty, thick and heavy, a lot of them, don't they? So, but yeah, horses for courses, isn't it? Might not be appropriate for an impy stout or whatever, but other beers maybe more so.
I just called the RSPCA to tell them I found 6 badges in a suitcase by the side of the road. Are they moving? Asked the operator. I'm not sure, but that would explain the suitcase.
Very good. Are they moving?
Thanks for that, Mark.
That's fucking awesome. I am nicking that one. That's brilliant.
Another good sugar to talk about, particularly with a very popular style, or a style that's become very popular, a sub-style, if you will, is pastry stouts. Mm-hmm. And in the main, I think lactose is one of those things that's kind of taken a bit of a resurgence from the milk stout into these big, typically really heavily flavored pastry stouts. So the likes of the, I don't know, Willy Wonka triple chocolate vanilla whip cookie flavored caramel stout, all that crazy shit that's going on, and you can find loads of them. But lactose is an interesting sugar, right? It says it's non-fermentable, typically to sack yeast, so it's one to experiment with, I would say, in some styles of high gravity brewing. It's going to increase your final gravity because it is non-fermentable, so you're going to end up with a sweeter beer, if that's what you're looking for, which is kind of really broadly the definition of what pastry stout is about, is a high ABV, typically high ABV stout with a quite sweet finishing gravity. So lactose, definitely worth thinking about within the broader spectrum of designing your recipes of particularly stouts.
Yeah, definitely. There are lots of other things that you can add. There are lots of other additions that you can make. There's a lot of people who add spirits to their beers as well. I know I did. I added a shitload of fucking bourbon. Who can forget the legendary rum and banana porter? I mean,
Here's the thing, Chris. We can add bourbon.
no, don't
but brew-
overlook the rum and banana porter, Andy.
No, but what I'm saying is, actual commercial breweries cannot add bourbon
No, they
into their
can't.
beers.
Well, they can.
So the way
but
they
get,
do it, well,
like,
they
shut
do
down.
it through. Well, no, they do it through putting it in bourbon casks
They
to get
do,
those
yes.
flavors.
They do.
But as a home brewer, you could just go like that, whack straight in with a
that's
full
just
bottle
the
of bourbon.
cheap method, isn't it, to get
Yeah.
the bourbon flavour in when you don't have an actual barrel to put it in. But
Why
And you
not?
don't have to
Yeah,
put it with that
and it-
horrific
and
wood
it
flavour.
smashes the
Why
ABV
not?
right up as well. So
Yeah.
bonus.
It does, yeah. It's a bit of a cheat. It's a cheap method to take your 8% MP up to like 10%. You just stick a whole bottle of JD in the keg, you know.
Although weirdly enough, I did the maths for Brett the other day. He's got I think he had a 50 litre or a 60 litre batch. I think it was 50 litre batch. And he put a full bottle of bourbon in, and it only added 0.7% ABV to it. It didn't actually add that much.
I guess at 50 litres, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't tend to
That ties
knock
in
it
with
up
Owen's
quite as
maths.
much as you would expect.
It does give
I
it a
think-
lovely flavour, though.
2% for a standard 5-gallon batch, but then if you're doing 60 litres, which is what
Yeah.
a batch two and a good bit, is it not? I don't know. It's
It's near enough 3, so it's like
that's why it's 0.8.
1 point. And it was 0.7% that it added.
Nothing.
I did the maths for him. It's very little. I mean, you could get that simply by optimizing your mash.
But then it's not about the flavour.
Equally, if it was a 23 litre batch, let's say, and you added a whole bottle of whiskey,
that's 2%.
That would be like 2% bump, which is pretty reasonable, right? But I think if you take it too far, the beer, I personally think, can become a little bit thin, and I think it can.
Yeah, definitely.
It does add a nice flavour, but it almost becomes a bit like you start to really notice. It's almost like you've just taken a glass of stout and shoved a shot of whiskey into it.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you kind of need to brew the beer heavier if you know you're going to put, big dose of spirits in there. You need to kind of brew it heavier, maybe have a higher finishing gravity, or even add some other unfermentables to it to kind of counteract that. Because otherwise you're getting into sort of beer cocktail territory, aren't you? Fairly quickly.
That does drop nicely into the next section where we're talking about the balance of these beers.
Yeah.
I bang on about balance pretty much every single episode. That and shandy drinking Southerners and Badgers and Marzens. I have my lineage that I just continue with every episode. But balancing a high gravity beer is a fucking art form. It really is. Because we've talked about the Boogoo ratio, your bitterness to gravity or bitterness to glycemic, whichever way you want to talk about it. And it's all about getting the hops correct. Now, I've talked about the Champagne on a few occasions. We all know that, my father-in-law loves his big beers. But the bottom line is, the Boogoo ratio on that was 0.85 or 0.8. I can't remember the exact number. I'd have to open up the recipe and have a look.
That's kind of IPA territory, Chris.
Exactly. But there was so much sweetness within that beer from the alcohol that it needed a good punch of bitterness to hide it. And even some of these impy stouts that you're drinking that are like 9.5%, 10%, I guarantee you they're up around about 0.6, 0.7.
Yeah,
They're
that's what I
gonna
was
be
thinking
up
when I was
there.
drinking. I was thinking that's probably about something like that, 0.67.
And it
I
hides
think it was
that
as high as
alcohol.
0.8, but
And it hides the alcohol.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Exactly.
And the thing is, the IBUs in it is probably mega because it was Magnum for bittering on that one, and it's probably mega, but because of that alcohol and that sweetness, it was
Yeah.
just like you don't even notice.
I think what it
Yeah,
comes
so
down
good.
to is not focusing on the number and going, oh, 70 IBUs, that's a fuckload. That's going to be really bitter beer. But like say, you know, the Bugu ratio or whatever is what's important there. It's, you know, because it's all relative, isn't it? 70 IBUs in a 5% beer is going to strip your teeth. But in a 10% impy stout, then you probably wouldn't even pick up on much of that bitterness, especially if it's, you know, got quite a you know, full body and a lot of sweetness in there. So yeah, it's, you know, the ratio will stay the same potentially for that style as you go up in gravity, and you're going to end up with a much higher level of bitterness that you want in order to get the balance that we're all talking about.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points for me that spring to mind. I think one I touched on the last podcast, the commercial pilot that Chris and I did. I brewed a beer, the Beer Geek Breakfast Stout. I think that had about 100 gram bittering addition, 3 different hops added up to about 100 grams, which is almost feels unnatural to be adding into a 90-minute boil. You were like, what the F are these guys thinking? Like, is this a mistype or what? But that just, I think that's a great example of where, you know, you do need to add that big bitterness to balance the beers off.
There's another thing to bear in mind there, which is that a lot of these beers are intended to be sat and aged for a long period of time, and your bitterness is going to fade naturally, and it's also going to smooth out a lot as well. So it's similar to sort of the a lot of the you know, sort of really old school kind of like English IPA recipes and stuff. You look at some of the hopping rates and the IBUs on those, and it's insane compared to like what is done currently. But that's done with the, you know, intention of that beer maybe sitting, you know, in a cask or whatever for months or years, and being aged for a long time
and also being put on a boat and sent, you know, halfway across the world to India.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the other thing is like when you are sort of almost touching back onto the brew day bit, I think if you're not familiar, the fact that we don't actually, many of us don't brew really high gravity beers very often. And if you don't have your process nailed down, your efficiency could be really variable. Like the range in which your efficiency is going to land is quite a lot larger than when you're brewing your more frequent beers, right, in a smaller ABV range. So then when you are brewing your beer and you start to measure things like pre-boil gravity and stuff like that, it's important to readjust where you think the beer is actually going to land in terms of your gravity units, so that you're not, if, for example, if you were to brew a beer, you were expecting it to be 10% and you measure your pre-boil gravity and you think you're probably heading more towards 8%, you're probably not going to want to add the same amount of hops to the beer than you did on the recipe that you originally defined for 10%, because the Bugu ratio is going to suddenly shift by like 20%. And you're going to end up with a much more bitter beer than you have originally sort of kind of thought through, right? So there's a few things to think about as you go through the brew day that may make you think, oh, I need to readjust and rethink that. Unless there are certain things you're going to do to kind of get your gravity back to kind of target. One of the risks, though, is if you choose to boil for longer, ensure that you do the boil before you add, like if you boil for an hour, then add your bittering hops. Don't add your bittering hops and then boil the beer for 2.5 hours, because that is obviously going to add quite a lot more bitterness.
Yeah, you don't do that.
Yeah, you don't do that.
You know, so there's a little tip there, just to, you know, if you are going to choose to on the fly boil your beer for longer, boil it without any hops for half an hour, or however long, then add your hops and carry on your recipe as if you were doing it normally.
That's
once
a
you're at
very,
that sort
very,
of
very good
pre-boil
shout,
gravity.
Owen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, boys, as much as I would love to continue with the discussion down the route that we're currently going down, we have to move to the commercial break because I am not going to be able to stop myself from drinking this beer.
Commercial break.
I guess you better go first then, Chris.
Yeah,
do
come on then.
do I really need to go first? Okay,
No,
so
we'll make him go last. Make him go last.
don't be a cunt. Okay. I'm
Go
pulling
on,
rank.
Chris.
We're going first.
Go on then.
This is a limited edition Imperial Honeycomb Bourbon Barrel Aged Stout by Vocation.
Oh,
It's coming in at a fairly monstrous
Noises.
10%. And holy shnikey, this is a beautiful beer. I've been saving this one for quite a while. I have another couple of Imperial limited edition beers, and this particular beer is the reason why I bought this glass. It's also the reason why I have the limited edition gold rimmed stemmed glass in the house. The smell from this beer is like licorice, followed by the smoothness of honeycomb. It's got, I'm not even sure if it's got chocolate malt in it. Does it say it has chocolate malt in it? Yes, chocolate malt's in it. It almost tastes like a fucking crunchy, right? This beer is epic. And it's thick and it's coating. And there's a bit of alcohol there, but not very much. It's got, obviously, it's a very balanced beer. But Jesus, H Christ on a fucking moped. This is a beautiful, beautiful beer.
Silky sex, Chris.
Let's put it this way. You boys are going to have to excuse me for a few minutes while I nip
Yeah.
outside.
Don't forget the baby wipes, mate.
No, fuck the baby whites.
Essential supplies.
Chris, just can you remember to put your underwear back on before you come back in? All right?
Okay, mate, I got you, fam. To be fair, it's just dust.
Mute the mic so we don't hear all the fapping sounds.
Since the vasectomy, it's just dust.
It's guys, it's the hedgehogs.
Yeah,
Chris hasn't selling the vasectomy.
Those horny
that's for
hedgehogs
sure.
again.
Yeah, I've got those horny hedgehogs again.
I've not seen the hedgehogs for a few days, which has actually got me quite worried, I'll be honest.
That's all we're going to hear.
Absolutely.
Anyway, who's next?
Sorry, I'm not finished.
Oh, well.
So
That was
the complexity within this beer is actually quite astounding. I didn't think that you could get as many different levels of flavor that are so different within a single beer. So you've got the chocolate, you've got the honeycomb, which is obviously really sweet. The chocolate's very rich. It almost tastes dark, weirdly enough. Then you've got a slight roast, a really slight roast, almost like they cap grained this one, right? Very, very slight roast. But then I'm getting elements of fruit. I'm getting what tastes almost like Morello cherries. You know, that really rich, deep cherry. But it doesn't say it's got any cherries in it, and it's a fucking honeycomb stout. So I don't know where I'm getting this dark fruit from. But it is.
The malts.
What flavour's your vape, Chris?
The current
Cherry.
I'm on pineapple and strawberry.
Okay.
This is a fucking banger, boys. And unfortunately, you can't get it anymore. Sorry.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it saves me spending more
a damn
money.
shame.
Holy fuck, that's awesome.
Nice and sexual. Huh?
That is nice.
Holy fuck.
I need Marvin Gaye. That's what I need.
You need Marvin Gaye in your life right now.
I need some Marvin Gaye.
Oh, yeah.
That's how I was feeling, Chris, with that
Oh
that
god.
Impy Stout I had earlier.
It is just a stunner. Anyway, I'm done now. Carry on.
Cool. Do you know I've went to a light beer, you know, one of these
What?
low ABV Arbor beers. Is it 6.2? See, after going from an
Andy,
Impy,
Andy.
I know that's the.
Just
do you know,
Andy,
that's
shut
the
the
strongest.
laptop. Shut the laptop and leave now.
that was the strongest beer I
Out.
had. No, there
Hang
was
on.
a stronger one, but I'd already reviewed it previous.
Hang
It was a Badger beer.
Hang on, just a second. Keep talking, Andy.
This
Yeah, just
There we go.
Me and Chris.
Yeah,
just
don't need to hear this. Fucking 6.2, you pansy. Fucking hell.
fuck's sake. Anyway, it actually 6.2, and it tastes like it's a pale ale.
What's it called?
Galazaka. So it's Galaxy Azaka Nipa that they've got a New England IPA. But yeah, after coming from the Impy Stout to this, it feels like there's no body.
The
Feels
Pilsner.
very yeah, totally. It
Feels like a
honestly,
Kolsch.
honestly, it feels like it's like kind of pale ale sort of thing. Although it probably is. If I was to come to this first, I'd be like, oh wow, that's really thick and dead creamy and stuff like that. Whereas now I'm just like, oh, it's quite light. It's definitely the alcohol and all that sort of thing. But tropical juice, like it's got the lime thing you can pick up. You know, we all talk about the kind of New Zealand. Is it Azaka with that slight liminess that you get on your tongue, on the finish and stuff like that. But yeah, sorry lads, I didn't get.
You
I
fucked it, Andy.
I fucked it.
You're right, Andy. We're only taking
started
it this
at a
way.
nice high ABV.
I mean, literally, Andy, the first thing that we talked about was big beers are over 7%. And
Yeah,
you pull
this
out a
isn't.
6.2.
I actually do have a 7%, but I'd already reviewed that one, which was the Badger one.
Dead badger beer.
The Dead Badger beer.
What was the
Oh.
Dead Badger beer?
It was was it Icy Badgers, and it was like the can had like kind of looked all like badger patterns.
Oh, I
And
must
it
have
was
missed that one.
7% stout.
Look how far we've come since Chris was reviewing. What was that 3-year-old beer that you reviewed once? Do you remember
Bishop's
that?
finger.
Bishop's
Bishop-
finger.
I
You
never
reviewed
did
a
such thing.
3-year-old bottle of Bishop's Finger on
I
the
never did such a
podcast.
Was
I
that on a live brew day?
It was the one with Harry. Harry was in the chat.
Yeah, I think he nearly left in disgust.
He came
on and he
went, This is what I've turned up for, a 3-year-old bottle of Bishop's Finger. Fucking hell, calm down.
That was one of the best beer reviews ever. That was great.
It's a bit of a laugh, you know, clear glass
Yeah.
bottle, skunked to fuck, 3 years old, pulled it out of the fridge. Yeah.
Legend.
No, I mean, this is the wonderful part. This is the bit that I absolutely love about the podcast, is hearing you three rant on about some beer that I'm probably never going to drink.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah.
Oh,
especially
it was the
Bishop's Finger.
Luke Stevens just said it was the Christmas episode,
Ah, right.
the hallowed Christmas episode.
I
where
may
we
have
were
been
all
slightly drunk.
absolutely
Probably.
shite-faced. weren't we?
There was a Christmas episode. I don't remember that.
Every one of us. Chris, I think, passed out in his chair.
Who
Tricky.
edited this one?
Tricky was definitely unconscious at one point during the podcast. I think I might have spilt a beer all over my keyboard, which was,
That does
I
Oh,
can
I
assure
literally-
you, was horrible to clean up.
I can't
There
wait
you go.
for this year's Christmas episode because I'm actually going to be putting some rock solid ironclad requirements in for this year's Christmas episode.
oh,
It better not be don't get really hammered, because forget it. I'm not turning up.
Number one,
Chris, do we need to go get Bishop's Finger the now? And then
number
age it?
one is going
Age
to
it in
be
direct sunlight for a few months.
fancy dress.
for that authentic.
Yes.
taste.
Leave,
And
leave
number
it to conservatory.
2, minimum 5 pints starting at 4%, followed by 5%, followed by 6%, followed by 7%,
You're not. No way.
followed by 8%.
No way.
Forget it. I mean, it's going to be like an 8-hour episode.
What's the problem?
Can we? Here's an idea for. I'm going to ad lib whilst we're chatting. An idea for a podcast, right? Is raid the homebrew shelf of doom. You know, like we've all got that shelf of beer that we've bottled beers, right? Because for whatever reason, they probably don't have labels on them. They're just sat on a shelf in the garage. Just grab a couple of those and we'll do an episode where we just review that and go, I've got no idea what it is. Let's have a go.
The mystery bottle at the back of the fridge.
The mystery bottle.
For years.
I think that's a great
I'll
idea.
probably find most of them are actually Chris's beer mail that he never bothered to fucking label.
Sorry, I've got
we have a new
It's
edition.
amazing.
You're right, Daddy.
Oh,
I'll be back in a bit.
No worries.
Duty calls, mate. All right, see you in a bit.
Someone's up in the middle of the night.
He's going to struggle to untangle those headphones.
Yeah, someone shut the bed.
No.
Oh,
I get that every single night, and it's amazing.
yeah.
Anyway.
Not at 3 a.m. It's not.
I only get another hour's kip after that anyway, Trick.
Oh,
Jeez.
Yeah.
fuck that.
Yeah. So there we go. Anyway, Tricky, come on. Your commercial.
Oh, is it me now?
Let's have it.
So I did plumb the depths of the aging section in the fridge, and I found, I don't know how old this is, but it's definitely a few years old. I found an old Brewdog abstract bottle, which I've had to spend most of the podcast trying to chew my way through the wax seal on the top, which is they're always a nightmare to get into, these things. But anyway, it's a bourbon barrel aged barley wine.
Wow.
11.5%. And yeah, you can see in there it's a sort of very, it's not as dark as it looks on the screen there, but it's a very sort of caramelly, thick, sort of syrupy looking beer.
Those are amazing. Those
Looks
abstract beers from Brewdog. I know a lot of people bash Brewdog, but they do make some absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, these were kind of back when they were actually doing some quite interesting and exciting sort of aged beers and stuff. I don't think they do the abstract brand or line of beers anymore, but there were definitely some good ones in that range. Lots of nice impy stouts and things. But yeah, so this is a barley wine. I'm not particularly that experienced with barley wine, but I know that if possible you should avoid getting the wax from the lid in it. So I'll just remove that before I swallow it.
Classic way to increase the gravity of your beer, that one.
It does.
Yeah, and it just make sure you don't ever. I think did you see John Anderson's post or chat on his YouTube? No. So John accidentally swallowed a ring pull.
Oh no, I did see that. He's still alive as far as I know.
Yeah, just probably.
So anyway,
Wow.
very rich kind of caramelly, malty thing on the nose. It's got, it's almost got like a little bit of a savoury kind of aroma to it. I don't want to say Marmite because it's not Marmite, but do you know what I mean? Like a little bit of a...
Oh, right.
Umami.
Umami, yeah, that's the word that I'm looking for.
Has it got the oak?
I think you can taste the bourbon more than you can smell it, maybe. But yeah, there's definitely
The vanilla.
you get that sort of like slightly warming kind of bourbon alcohol kick on the back end of it. But it's a nice, quite smooth. You know, you can definitely tell it's proper boozy. But
Yeah.
Do you get like a banana-y thing in there? Is there like a not like a banana ester, but just like a candied banana? thing.
I think now that you say that, I think like when you get a really like kind of overripe banana and you get a there's that certain flavor from those that you can get. There is kind of like a little bit of a hint of that to it.
So more banana cake than banana.
Yeah, sort of like a banana bready kind of a little bit of fruit cake thing going on there as well.
Because I think I might have had that beer
Hmm.
a long time ago, and I do remember it having kind of a banana-y sort of thing going on.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely that sort of rich malty fruit cakey thing, quite syrupy, and there's like that kind of warmth, bourbon warmth. So like when you've just had a shot of kind of neat bourbon and you get that kind of the glow afterwards. There's a bit of that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not a barley wine aficionado at all, but that's
So in 20 minutes
that's a
time,
nice fireside sipper.
Tricky. So 20 minutes time, you'll be paralytic in that chair.
Yeah, I'll be.
Has anyone ever brewed a barley wine?
No,
I have not. No.
No.
Well, basically, yeah, I've made champagne.
Yeah, well, I guess that is effectively a barley wine.
To be fair, the recipe probably isn't much different for that, is it?
No.
I'd kind of like to. I'd like to have a go at making a barley wine.
I will let you know though. There's no point using Bohemian floor malted pilsner in a barley wine
No.
if you ain't fucking tasting it.
No.
Well, yeah. It's interesting. How many of you would actually brew a high ABV beer like we're talking tonight, like the 10, 12%? Is that
Maybe once a year. Maybe twice a year.
Yeah, it's a special occasion brew, maybe.
Yeah.
Once for the father-in-law, once to make a KBS clone, and to be fair, never again.
yeah? Fair
It
enough. I
seems
think
to-
that the biggest I've went's about 8%, to be honest. I think my previous problems was obviously mash tun. But I could probably, if I was doing a 5 gal batch and a 10-gallon SS Brewtech infusion thing,
Yeah.
you could do a big batch in that.
Fucking name drop.
I think for a lot of homebrewers, it's a Christmas special, isn't it? We were talking about the Christmas special earlier. It's
But a lot of
the
people do
thing
that.
is, if you want to do it for
April-
Christmas, you ought to really do it in like March,
April, March, yeah.
ready
May,
for
something like that.
Christmas, right?
Yeah. not
Whereas I always end up leaving it to about now and then going, oh yeah, I'll brew a big beer for Christmas, and then it gets to Christmas and I go, oh, I haven't left it long enough, and then
so it goes to next Christmas.
And then he ends up drinking it at Easter. I mean, the only person I know who brews beers like that on a regular basis is Brett Harmon. He constantly seems to be crushing the 8.5%, 9%ers. Just constantly.
good lad.
I'm not suggesting Brett is in any way a fucking alcoholic. I'm just suggesting that he does like his big ABV beers. You
I
know,
always find that you have one and you're fucked. You know what I mean?
I've done probably 200 mils, not even 200 mils, probably 100
You'll be
mils
feeling
of
it?
this. I'm feeling it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a sipper, this one.
Aye.
Amazing.
I need a pipe.
Amazing.
So, what do you guys reckon I'm reviewing?
I don't know.
It's a Cloudwater beer.
Oh, is this
Triple
the one that
IPA.
you told us? Is this the
It's-
quadruple IPA?
It's not a quadruple IPA. It's a double IPA from Cloudwater Brewing. It's called the Light Grey one. It has maybe the feet of a wolf on there. I don't know. They've gone a bit verdant with the whole marketing bit, but it's a Nelson and Citra double IPA at 8%. It's intensely flavoursome, combining a dank character with ripe, juicy fruit. Canned on, let me see, when was it canned? 24th of June. So it's maybe not as fresh as it could be, a couple of months old. But this thing,
Prime.
I mean, this thing is like absolute like juice milk. You know, it's super thick and
And that's one thing that you never in your life ever have to
super
worry about.
dank. I mean, it is so dank on the nose. Oh yeah. Which I don't know where that's coming from, because it must be the combination of Nelson and Citra, right? Nelson and Citra. You guys find that way more amusing than I do. I just keep talking through it until.
But this is the thing, Owen.
Your voice matches it beautifully.
Your voice matches fucking Barry White. Like, boom, you're just in there. It's like Lucy's a very lucky lady. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. It's very complimentary. But anyway, what was I saying? I mean, it is very, very dank, and you're getting that Nelson character on the nose. It's got
The
that
wine.
kind of, it's got a grape thing, but it's not. It's kind of a really it's almost like a emaciated grape. It's got like a really sweet, overripe grape aroma to it, mixed in with like, I think maybe it's like grape and really overripe mango. Smells kind of dank. So it smells gorgeous, it looks gorgeous, and it tastes like a fucking cloud. It's like if you could drink cloud, this is, and it's cloud water, right? They like it, everything I've ever said about cloud waters, double IPAs. I'm going to take back, because this is just sumptuous.
One beer doth not make a brewery.
Sumptuous.
It's just so smooth. I mean, it's hiding at least 2 or 3% of that 8% ABV. It's super smooth. It's pillowy. It's a little bit bitter, but it's got beautiful flavor. Yeah, I mean, what a treat! Like, it's a lovely beer, and a great combo, a great hop combo, Nelson and Citra. Yeah, I'm very pleased with myself right now.
Do you know what? I don't have any Citra.
Cheers, guys. I don't think I do. I might have a bit, but I nearly bought. I put a get a brewed order in today. I very nearly bought a kilo of Citra.
Yeah,
but then I thought, you know what? I've got so many hops in the fridge. I don't need any more Citra. I'll just use something else. That was
it's
my
probably
conclusion.
a good idea not to have it, just to force you into actually putting something else.
Just brewing
in
with
there.
something else.
Exactly right.
Because otherwise,
Exactly.
it goes in everything. Otherwise, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
pretty
does.
much,
It's
like.
the base hop for
everything.
I mean, obviously not for Chris's Marzens and Medsons even. But
the weird thing is this, right? Recently, I've been drinking beers that push me out of my comfort zone. They push me to kind of drink other stuff and to taste other stuff and to try other things. And recently, I have developed an absolute fucking horn for Azaka and Eldorado.
Oh.
And the two of them together, every beer that I seem to have had seems to be falling in on Azaka and Eldorado. And sometimes Amarillo and Azaka, sometimes Eldorado and Amarillo, sometimes, a kind of a mixture of those three for some reason. They seem to be real popular with the beers that I'm drinking at the minute. And holy shit, you can shove your Citra up your ass. I'll quite happily take Azaka.
I'd agree. All of those are great hops.
And they make some wonderful combinations as well. They really do. So can we put a pin in the Hop Edition commercial break for episode 33? Can we do that?
I think it's done. I think it's done.
Because we're 2 hours in and Owen is looking slightly worse for wear.
Really?
Yeah, you're starting to slur, buddy.
Oh, well, I apologise for that.
No, don't apologise.
He's fine.
It's standard practice.
He's fine. It's your hearing that's
is that what it is?
To go, yeah, that's what it is. It's Is it ringing slightly?
So you're not pissed enough yet, mate. So
This is so fucking
That's
thick.
the one.
It's almost difficult to drink.
This was always going to be the one that everyone would just be like,
Listen, I love you guys. Right, let's move on. So the first thing that we want to talk about after the commercial break, and there isn't that much left for us to talk about. We could probably knock through this in about 45 minutes to an hour. So, common issues with fermentation of high gravity brewing. Okay, the first thing, the cause of 90% of these issues is going to be your yeast health, or lack of nutrients, or lack of oxygen. Okay, however, there are a few that do tend to step away from that, but they are quite important. So number one, and the first one, and the one that the vast majority of people seem to get, not only when they brew an Imperial Wherry, but also when they brew a high gravity normal proper beer, is a stuck fermentation. Okay, I've done a lot of research on stuck fermentations to the point where I have had one in my life. I've never had more than one. Okay, stuck fermentation comes down to three main things that I have discovered, and that is, number one, you're a fucking prick and you've done something wrong. Secondly, no, seriously, number one, right, you have not pitched a sufficient amount of the correct yeast. Number two, you have not properly oxygenated your wort. Or number three, the brewing gods hate you.
I'll add one in there, Chris.
I mean,
Sometimes
seriously, number three was clearly a joke and nobody fucking laughed.
Sometimes it's just not a stuck fermentation. Your yeast is just finished and it's within the range of its attenuation, and people just think, oh, it's 5 points short of what it should be. It's a stuck fermentation. No, it's just stopped a little bit lower than it was.
Yes,
you expected it to.
If you've got a good amount of foam, you've blasted it with pure oxygen, you've pitched the correct rate of yeast, you've given it the right temperature, you've given it sufficient time, because a lot of people complain about stuck fermentations when what they really mean is slow fermentation. I checked it after 8 days and it was only at 1023. So fucking leave it for 14 days then, you prick. This is a lot of the problem that we come down to, okay? And a lot of people don't realize you sometimes have to bump the temperature at the end to increase the activity of those yeast in order to get them to chew through the last couple of points. But like Tricky said, sometimes it's just done. It's just finished. That's the end of it.
That's why they get, like, yeast attenuation is in a range, right? It's and assumably that range has been a sample that the yeast producers have tested, researched, and validated. And sometimes it's just going to finish at the bottom end or the top end of that range.
Yeah.
Like you guys were saying, sorry, about the kind of 1025 or 1030 or something where it finishes out there. Sometimes, like we were saying earlier, you maybe mash too hot and it's just too many complex sugars. So
you'll find some yeasts are really sensitive to that as well. I've certainly noticed there's certain strains where some strains you can change your mash temp and it's going to make a bit of a difference, but it's not going to be massive. Whereas others, it'll be like, 2 or 3 degrees higher mash and you're adding 10, 15 points onto your final gravity easily.
Windsor.
I was going to say some of the English ale yeast in particular. I found, I think Windsor's a bit of a tricky one anyway, because it's quite temperamental, and I think it does decide just to stop quite often.
It's like Ringwood's.
It decides to do that.
It's like Ringwood's slightly more irritating sister, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I've had Windsor finish at 1.004, and I've had Windsor finish at 1.018. And both beers were aimed for 10-11 finishes.
Yeah. Mark's just mentioned SO4 in the chat as well, and that is one that comes up constantly in threads on, forums and YouTube, Facebook and whatever, where it's 1020, isn't it? That's like the magic number for SO4. Sometimes it just goes 1020. Yeah, fuck it, I'm done. See you later. and there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for that. It's
And
just a bit of a
the thing about SO4
finicky
finish.
yeast.
The thing about SO4 finishing at 1020 as well is that is 2 points outside of the top end of its range.
Yeah.
The top end of its range is 1018. It's almost like it just goes, fuck you. But the thing about SO4 finishing at that point could also be the fact that the vast majority of people who use SO4, they don't use the liquid yeast version, they use the dried yeast version, which are invariably stored on a shelf in a homebrew shop at room temperature for 27 years before you buy it. There may only be 3 live yeast in that pack by the time you've rehydrated it. That's another thing you have to take into account, and that is where having a healthy fermentation of the correct yeast comes into it. But like Tricky said, sometimes stuck fermentation isn't stuck fermentation, it's just done.
It's sorry.
Go on, Andy.
It's just like the stuff that you get in the actual, with your kit beers, like the little sachet will probably will be SO4 or whatever Windsor or something that's in there. Is the standard.
I personally just, I think I've used SO4 once.
I've never used it.
I just dodge it. I'm just like, I'm not. I just see it. I hear so many complaints about SO4.
Yep.
And it's just like, if I want an English ale yeast, I'm going to go pick something else.
I'm going to go get a liquid.
I'll go
I will literally get a liquid yeast if I'm going to go and get an English ale yeast. Something
I just don't particularly like it either, like as an actual yeast character, mainly because it just tastes like generic kit beer whenever I use it. Like it's got this, this flavor profile that I associate with sort of kit beers, and also it's kind of like the default yeast for a lot of bang average kind of regional microbreweries, for want of a better word, as well. So you kind of, it has a very familiar and slightly underwhelming flavor to it for me.
I know there's so many more exciting strains out there to use.
Is Nottingham not a really good yeast?
Nottingham's pretty cool.
It's pretty good.
It's a very reliable and very flocculent yeast, but I don't tend to use it because personally, I don't know if other people have got a different opinion, but personally, I've always found with anything with a decent amount of hops in it, it tends to be fairly, push the hop flavor down quite a bit for me.
Mutes everything,
anyway.
doesn't it?
It's quite neutral. It does mute stuff. It's not a very exciting yeast, but it's a very reliable yeast.
It is a good shout for high gravity brewing, though. Actually, Nottingham is, if you're going to go for a dry yeast for high gravity brewing, I think Nottingham is a very good option.
Yeah, it's the one that kind of sprung to mind. The other one is there not Mangrove Jacks does one that they say for the kind of higher, is it New World? It's good for like the higher gravity beers.
Yeah, New World's pretty good for that.
Porters, like strong beers.
I'm not sure what yeast that actually is, but it is a good one for HG beers, definitely.
Yeah,
I've never used it.
I think I've used it.
So let's jump on from that one, because we could sit here and we could talk about different yeast strains all night.
Yeah,
but I think one of the other things that we need to take into account here is the off flavors that you can get with high gravity beers. Now, these aren't necessarily off flavors from things that you've done necessarily wrong. They tend to be off flavors that are they're like a hazard of the game. Okay, so you can get some fusel alcohols because that's just general yeast stress from having to chunk its way through as much high sugar wort. I've found green apple acetaldehyde in so many big beers. It is fucking untrue. You can get that, as Andy put it, because he knows the flavor well, the condom flavor, the autolysis, that burnt
like burnt rubber.
Yeah, it's fucking horrific.
Oh,
that is simply due to too many dead yeast being in that beer.
You said that the yeast cells are basically exploded.
Yeah, autolysis, self-splitting, and one that me and Tricky have covered on many occasions, which is gravity creep. So we talk about gravity creep a lot, don't we, Tricky?
We've definitely covered that in the past quite a bit, yes.
We have. So overcarbonation, bottle bombs, shit exploding, fountains when you open a beer, just, issues from too much carbonation. And we talked on Thursday quite a lot about this one. If you're going to bottle a big beer and it finishes at 10:23, because that's where it's supposed to finish, don't fucking prime it. For God's sake, don't pressure ferment it and let it carbonate in the keg, because there's literally no point if you're going to age it at all. No point whatsoever. I've had issues with an impy stout that I made where I put it into a keg. That keg was in a fridge. I aged it for 9 months. I came to it and it was the most overcarbonated beer I think I've ever drunk in my life. I'm pretty sure the only reason that keg didn't explode is because it was actually rated to like 150 psi. I've had some terrible ones of them, and we've all had those beers that somebody sends you an impy, you pop the lid, you should be really near a fridge, near a sink, because all of a sudden you've just got a brown fountain coming out the top of the bottle.
That's mad.
This is because of hydrolysis of the longer chain sugars, giving the yeast more sugar to chew through. You will get an increased gravity level, you will get an increased carbonation level, and you will get a reduction in body if you get gravity creep. It's a horrible, horrible thing, but it is the well-known thing is if you're bottling an impy, you don't prime it. You just let it go. We agree?
That's it. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's all about and we're going to get onto this when we talk about packaging right at the end, but I think it all depends about how quick you're going to drink it. But typically with high gravity beers, you're not going to want to drink that beer quickly. So I think if it's going to sit on the shelf in a bottle for more than, shall we say, 6 months, and I think in reality, because of where we are in the UK, we've got seasonality through that as well.
Big time. You've
got to consider, like, if you are going to brew that beer in March, put it into a bottle and age it through the summer. Assuming most of us don't have a cellar, it's going to sit in the garage. They are going to warm up and they are going to continue to ferment slightly in the bottle. So I'd
love a cellar.
I think most of us have probably got experience of that, not just with your stronger beers, but just generally, particularly kind of darker beers and beers with lots of specialty malts and stuff in them will often be affected by that same thing.
Anything with a lot of crystal malts in, you tend to get it.
Yeah. And again, when previously when a lot of people would have been bottling, like say, storing it in warm sheds and garages over the summer is definitely not a helpful factor in that, I don't think.
No, I mean, I bottled quite a bit of beer for beer mail, and for one reason or another, I just didn't get round to it. Didn't have room in my fridge, left it in the garage, just in PET bottles, and all of it I ended up opening because I noticed the PET bottle caps were like domed at the top. And I was like, I might just test a couple of them, open them, and they were just like absolute eruptions.
Pure gushers.
So pure gushers. I was like, right. And actually a lot of them, like as I pouring them away, I got a really strong acetaldehyde.
Diacetyl.
That's
aroma
from
in the bottle.
Green apple.
Which has actually happened since I've put it into the bottle, and then it's just sat warm through the summer, and all of it ended up just having to go. And some good beers wasted as well.
It's fucking heartbreaking, isn't it?
That's the shit that commercial brewers. That's the shit commercial brewers have to worry about. Like,
exactly right.
Oh man.
It's all about like shelf stability, which for the main part,
we don't have to worry.
The homebrewers don't have to worry too much about, because I think most of us keg beers. right? So most of them are just sat at 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees. You're not going to have that issue. But if you are going to take that occasional beer, bottle it up, you've got to be thinking about shelf stability. And that's where not priming the beer is going to be a absolutely massive tip.
Yeah, I agree with that one, definitely.
It does make you wonder a bit about commercial breweries who are bottle conditioning, sort of what they might be doing, whether they're actually, in some cases, maybe pasteurizing after it's carbonated, and so it's not, they're probably actually killing that yeast off in the bottle. I don't know.
I think using some sort of chemical, like what is it? The one that everybody uses to get rid of
Potassium
chloramines, metabisulfate. Yeah,
metabisulfate. Yeah.
Sorry, metabisulfite. I was right. You've got to kill that yeast off, or at least retard it to the point where it can't ferment anymore. That's a good thing to think of. Might actually be something that works for the higher gravity beers if you want them to remain stable. Let them gas up over 2 weeks, and then maybe throw some metabisulfate in, or just metabisulfate from the beginning, so it's much, much, much slower, because it retards it, but it doesn't actually stop it.
Well, it might be a good shout because you.
Oh, we're being spammed.
Charming.
Hey,
Oh, amazing.
Yes, Pete.
Oh, Pete. Hi, Pete.
Bye, Pete.
Bye, Pete.
So I was about to say, I was just going to say you get the added benefit there of scavenging oxygen there. So if you're aging a beer, that's going to be helpful as well, isn't it? As well as.
Oh, can we not have Pete back? He was a good guy.
Pete can fuck off.
Pete seemed like a laugh.
Yeah.
Come on, bot Pete, come back.
Pete seems like he needs skull fucking. Anyway, in the eye socket. Right. So let's talk about pressure fermentation for high gravity. The pros and cons of it.
The
pros are you can reduce the height of your krausen, which is going to be a massive issue. Eruptions, high krausens, huge thick krausens, the need for blow off tubes and stuff like that. Pretty much everybody knows about that when it comes to big beers.
Yeah.
But the reality is pressure fermentation will crush that krausen down. But at the same time, you're adding carbonation to your beer. If you're going to age it, do you really want that beer to be carbonated in any way, shape, or form?
See, the thing is, you guys talk about pressure fermenting, right? And this is me now in the game of pressure fermenting. See, at that temperature, what you're fermenting at, the 20 odd degrees, even if it is 10, 15 psi, you're not getting the same volumes in that you would get at, say, 6 degrees at 15 psi as such. So, are you actually putting that much carbonation in? It's not until you get to the end game point where you're cold crashing, and then how much CO2 are you actually going to have in it? It's not going to be that much.
No, it's not.
And do you know what? See, when you pressure ferment, the bubbles you get off it is so fine as well. It's like when you pour it, it's super fine.
Oh, Andy's just trying to join the pressure ferment gang.
Hey,
isn't he?
It.
He's trying to I'm like, I've got a pressure fermentable uni tank. I know what you're talking about.
Because I've got the carb stone as well. I've been watching videos about how you actually carbonate to certain, setting your spun to, and then it's like you have to set, was it 30 psi, and then flow through or something, or you can leave it overnight, sort of thing. But yeah,
no idea. I don't think any of us use a carb stone.
Just me then.
But no, I think pressure fermentation for high gravity. I don't know whether, Chris might have some experience. He doesn't really brew high gravity beers, but in theory, you could pressure ferment a high gravity beer.
Let's get the Dr. Hans doing those experiments we don't want to do.
Yeah, but equally, we talked a bit about fermentation temperature, and and overall on a higher gravity beer, you probably want to reduce that fermentation temperature down slightly, because ultimately what you're looking for is a nice, slow and steady fermentation. I think there's a risk with a high gravity beer that if you ferment it at 20 degrees, you're going to have a very rapid and aggressive, explosive, eruptive fermentation, which
But then could you not knock back all the off flavors?
No, typically that will drive off flavors, if anything.
Yeah,
with
the problem
with
is you
a
don't want to stress out the
overly
yeast, do
quick.
you, Owen?
No, you don't. If
Yeah.
you have an overly fast fermentation, excluding, I would say, quake, then there's a risk you're probably going to have some off flavors in there.
Owen, you said the magic word. That's how we'll fix it. We'll do our impy stout with Quake.
That's a good shout. I think it's well suited. I think Voss is a great option for an impy stout.
Yeah.
In my
To be
opinion.
fair, I've had there's a brewer at my local home brew club who does lots of impies with quite yeast, and they've turned out really well. To be fair, and the other good thing is they seem to age really quickly as well. Like they'll get to a point where they're drinkable a lot quicker than it would seem that you would normally have to wait. So it's definitely worth exploring.
Yeah, get the beast yeast.
Yeah.
So a couple of other tips, or one useful tip for particularly high gravity brewing is agitating the beer, or trying to keep the beer in the yeast in suspension in some way, whether that's just giving it a gentle stir with something, a sanitized spoon, or instead turning your Firmzilla upside down, or just something that's gonna
Can you do that?
Yeah, I've done it.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Can you do that with your fermenter, Andy?
Mate, I just connect CO2 at the bottom and blow CO2 through the cone,
some gas
and then
up
it's
through the
all
bottom.
good. Do you know what I mean?
You can't do that though, can you? Because it weighs 80 fucking kilos.
No, you just blow CO2 through the cone.
No,
it's all
it's
good.
not the same as
That's why
turning
you've got all these
upside down,
additional
though, is it?
ports.
It's not the same as heaving around, turning a Firmzilla
just keep
upside
it
down by hand. That's
that's
that's real
something
craft
special.
brewing. That's
That's
real
much
craft
more.
brewing,
That's
Andy.
much more user friendly and
that's
ergonomic method as
That's
well.
more homebrew.
Yeah, I mean your back hurts for a week afterwards, but it's blood, sweat, and tears, guys.
That was like me today with the 20-gallon brew pot, taking it into the house to still clean it, because fuck knows how you clean them in here.
You need a new
Wow.
sink.
Need a sink, yeah.
This fucking fermenter is going to cost you about 12 grand by the time you're done, aren't you?
Yeah,
It's
but fucking awesome.
ridiculous. Oh dear.
The setup's like I've got. I would say my setup's pretty much it's getting there to that Norwegian, Instagram brewer level.
That's what you want.
They have
innit?
the trickiest setups. The Norwegian brewers.
That's what you want.
Insane.
You want
That's
that trick
it.
setup. Yeah.
All
It's
the blue lights everywhere, sort of thing.
What, like my PC that you complained about and told me was shit?
Just black everything out and have all the blue neon lights going.
Yeah. Okay. Can I talk about osmotic pressure now?
Yes.
Go ahead, because nobody else wants to.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy when you were talking about trying to teach us that one.
Okay, so Owen's fucked off. He don't care anymore. So osmotic pressure is a real thing, and it can affect your yeast with a high gravity wort. Okay.
Yeah.
So osmotic pressure is essentially a pressure which is put upon the yeast. Osmosis is essentially
It
movement.
It sucks the water out of the yeast, guys. That's
It
how
does.
It works. That's
Osmosis
crazy shit.
is the movement of water from a high concentration to a low concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. All right? That's the most important bit. So if you've got a yeast which has got a lot of water in it, because it's a living organism, it's going to be probably 90-95% water. And then you've got a wort which is let's say 1.1, okay, just as a number, there's going to be comparatively a lower concentration of water in the wort compared to the yeast. Yeast are surrounded by a semi-permeable membrane, which is how they control the in and out of nutrients and bits and bobs. So you can get essentially a dehydration of the yeast because of the osmotic pressure that exists across the semi-permeable membrane because of the high gravity wort.
Sucks the water out.
It
Kills
essentially sucks the water out of the yeast and can either send it into a hibernation state, suspended animation, for want of a better term. It can make the yeast go slow. It can make the yeast suffer. It can cause problems with the reactions that are occurring within the yeast, the biochemistry of the yeast. So that's a very real thing. So what you need to counteract that osmotic pressure is a rapid start to your fermentation to get rid of the sugar, to increase the alcohol level,
Big pitch,
and basically to stop that slow start, that sluggish beginning to fermentation. A good bunch of oxygen in there will help because it'll promote the yeast into working faster. But osmotic pressure is a very real thing. This was something that was talked about on an article that one of us was reading. I can't remember who it was. And essentially, that's basically osmotic pressure in a nutshell and how it's going to affect your yeast. Up to maybe, I don't know, 1090, 1070, 1080, you're not really going to notice osmotic pressure being that much of an issue. But when you get to the 1100,
barley wine,
the barley wine, the super impies, it's going to become an issue. You need that rapid start to your fermentation to remove the sugar and hence lower the osmotic pressure.
So
Has that explained it?
Yeah. Oxygenating your wort or wort, is it something any of us do?
I mean, I splash it in from a high volume.
Only in the sense I make sure it has lots of bubbles.
That's about it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't have an oxygen cylinder or anything like that. However, if I was brewing impy stouts all the time, it's something that I'd probably be more likely to consider, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I was having issues with high finishing gravities, and I bought one of those like oxygenation stones with a little pump that would pump.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it turned out it was just my craft beer pie wasn't properly calibrated, so it was smashing really hot. And that's why my brews were finishing ultra high.
That's a good point. Coming back to the stuck fermentations quickly, like probably there's more than a few people who are in that same situation. They just need to check their thermometers are actually calibrated and they're not actually mashing at 70, 72 or whatever.
Exactly.
There is a lot of issues due to let's say poor maintenance of equipment within the homebrew world.
Self builds.
Oh yeah. I mean, I calibrated mine, but yeah.
You're a scientist. I'm
this
just
is
an
true.
engineer, mate.
Yeah.
I just built the fucker.
You've got no fucking idea how to make it work. You just built it.
It wasn't until I noticed the problem.
This is the thing, though. You notice the problem, you fix the problem. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I could do it myself.
The fact that you produced 12 shit beers until you did was, completely beside the point.
It was like maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Right, let's shift this one on swiftly to aging. Okay, Owen, when you've produced big beers, what would you say is a general rule of thumb when it comes to the aging process?
Oh, well, Chris, it's funny you should ask that question.
It is. It's almost like there's an answer written down.
It's almost like there might be an answer on this notes that we've written. Generally, we've talked about this in the past. I think the higher the ABV, the longer you're going to want to age the beer.
Yeah.
Right. Unless, of course, I would say high ABV highly hopped beers are a slightly different rule of thumb. There's
Yeah.
Put those in a separate category. So your double IPAs, your triple IPAs, you're going to want to drink those fresh. So don't age your triple IPA. All right, with your 600 grand dry hop. But everything else, which generally falls into more of a malt forward bracket, is you're going to want to age it for longer, dependent on the amount of ABV. That's the rule of thumb. There you go.
The higher the ABV, the longer you age it.
Correct.
Within reason, dependent upon hoppiness. I'd
I
agree with
think
that.
so.
And Tricky, how would you be aging these beers? You know, what would you be doing with them?
I mean, nowadays, my personal approach to it would definitely be to bulk age, as opposed to, if you've got the capacity to do so with a spare keg or whatever, would be to bulk age as opposed to slinging them straight into bottles. Partly because of the reasons that we already discussed in terms of it being difficult to sometimes sort of hone in on the the carbonation level that you want and all those kinds of things. So I'd give it more time in a keg where it's not going to be quite as dramatic a problem if you do get a little bit of extended fermentation going on, and then maybe bottle at a later date would be my kind of personal preference these days.
I think that's a bloody good shout, to be fair. I think and unless you believe the plethora of people who think 85 quid is an appropriate price for a second-hand keg, and you just go to one of the homebrew shops and get one for 45, it's cheap enough to be able to buy.
Chris, it depends if you're going for the tall skinnies or the short fats, because the tall skinnies, you can't get them anywhere, and so you will be getting a higher price.
I mean,
Really?
The short fat ones, you'll be able to get them brew keg tap, for example.
I mean, come on, Andy. Everybody knows long and thin slips right in, but it's short and thick that does the trick.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
It depends on your kegerator, to be honest. So
that's what she said.
I think we know which side of the fence Chris falls.
Mate, I'm hung like a hamster. Fucking hell.
So, actually, that's a question. What type of kegs have you boys got? Is it the short, fat, or tall?
Have you seen the size of my fucking kegerator, mate? It doesn't matter.
I've got a mixture. I like a bit of variety.
Yeah, I've got a mixture. I reckon I've probably got. I think I've got five short and fat ones, 3 thinner tall ones.
Yeah, I think there's the Beko fridge that I'm going to now start using, and this old kegerator here. That's just only about, you could get 2 tall skinnies in that, and that's why I started off with the tall skinnies. The new one I've got with the 3 taps and then the hand pull off it, the 4, that could get 4 short fat ones in, all beside each other, no problem. But the Beko, if I'm going to start using that now as my new kegerator, then I think I need to use the tall skinnies. But what I could do is use the tall skinnies that I've got, like the 5 of them. I could put them in the Beko or whatever, and then just get 4 short fats into the beast.
And then
in case you need 12 kegs or whatever.
Yeah, I've got 6 at the minute. I mean, right. So keg count, what have we got?
Well, I think I've got 8 or 9. 8,
Yeah,
I think.
I think I've got 9 and a couple that are awaiting renovation, so probably 11.
Oh, fuck off and ask someone else. I've got 14.
Amazing.
Yes.
So between us,
there is no way you're
we've
ever
got
going to
about,
get to the point where they're all full of beer either. Right?
No,
here's
between
the
us,
thing,
we've got
though,
about
Rich.
40.
I can fit 8 in my kegerator.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's a kegerator. It's not a fucking keezer. It's a kegerator.
Yeah. So is it 4 and 4?
I can fit 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, I could probably do that in the big one.
That's a big old fridge.
And they're short and fat as well.
Oh, yeah.
I can fit 2 side by side at the back, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, 2 at the front, top and bottom.
Yeah.
That's a big fucking fridge.
It's a big fucking fridge. Yeah. Well, I've got 6 taps on it and a a bowl ITAP.
Oh, the iTaps.
Yeah.
I need to get mine all fitted now.
But I've got kegs that I've got kegs with like, I've got party tap set up, so I'll send one to my dad's. You know, I like to have a couple of clean ones to be able to, you know, capture CO2 and stuff like that. And just spares, you know.
Yeah.
Spares.
In case you want to carbonate some water,
or if I make a ginger beer, or if I decide to make a prosecco, or if I do a rhubarb wine, and I like to be able to keg everything. I can't be fucked with bottling them all.
No, I've got like a little cannonball thing. It's like a 7-liter one, and so I was it when you went to friends for a curry?
Tricky's got the same one.
Yeah, I took that. I just connected it up, put on the pressure relief valve, slow, put it in. Now away you go, party tap, boom. And those little mini CO2 cartridges I've got.
Yeah, but my in-laws are all alcoholics, so I can't not take a 19-liter keg.
It's getting tanned.
We went over for a barbecue for somebody's birthday. I can't remember who it was, and there was me, father-in-law, 2 brother-in-laws, and 1 sister-in-laws drinking beer, and we nailed the keg in 4 hours.
Yes.
Yes.
That's doable, like, but yeah.
I mean, it's only like 4 pints each anyway, isn't it?
No, it's 8 pints each, but yeah, it's just short of. It was like 7.5, 8 pints each.
It's 30 pints, isn't it?
Well, the problem for me wasn't the amount that I was drinking; it was the amount that the sister-in-law was going through. She was fucking smashing it to bits.
It's easy for you to blame the sister-in-law now, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Yeah, it weren't me. I fucking drove back. You know what I mean? I only had 2. But it was an interesting time. The other thing that's on the notes as well is barrel aging.
Yeah, I think bulk aging is an interesting point of Tricky raised. I think bulk aging gives you some flexibility to add more flavour to the beer when adding things like wood, fruits, stuff that maybe less so fruit, but wood is certainly an option, right? In terms of wood chips, bits of barrel, wood spirals,
throw some
cocoa
spices
beans
and stuff in there. Yeah, cocoa beans, vanilla, stuff like that.
And it's just much easier to be able to like age the beer on that in bulk in a keg. Then you can taste test as well. Much easier on the way, right? Because effectively you're kind of using it as like an aging tank or a bright tank or what in smaller scale homebrew terms, which you simply could not do if you just batch primed and bottled a beer. Which I guess is not dissimilar to the idea of barrel aging, which effectively for most homebrewers isn't something that we tend to do because barrels don't very often come in 25-liter versions, and they're also hideously expensive.
Yeah.
Although I think the malt miller do sell a 25-liter oak barrel.
See, the Glasgow homebrewers, they're right into their crazy shit like that. Like,
are they?
It's never. It's they don't talk about IPAs and NEPAs and all that. It's all about so what are you barrel aging now? You know, and what sours have you got on? You know,
yes,
just proper crazy shit. And it's like,
who drinks sours? Fucking hell.
Not you, Chris. Not you. I've heard you hate sours.
No, he's made the next step on the.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say the next 3 to 5 years I'm not gonna end up with a subset of barrels in my garage with like one's gonna have like some sort of sour Solero in there. One's gonna have like a Flanders red. Another's gonna have like an Impy stout. I can't say I'm not gonna do that.
You know it. It's happening.
You know it's gonna happen, don't you? That's the thing.
it's like
If you worked out where you're putting them yet, Owen?
No, I haven't even thought
in the
about that.
garage, no?
I don't want to think about that. But as us homebrewers, it's always like, well, what's the next step of evolution in terms of Andy, you just spent like
12
£10
million
million pounds on rebuilding your brewery because you bought one fermenter. And also, it's like, I guess the barrel aging project thing is quite a cool community thing to do as well. Like, there's nothing stopping the four of us, perhaps, potentially collaborating and filling up a barrel and fermenting that out as a project, or your local homebrew club collectively having a barrel that you fill up.
Yeah, that's
all that sort of fun stuff, Anyway,
I think it's one of those things. Do you know what I mean? Where you can definitely get some barrels, and you can definitely fill them with beer, and you can definitely go down that route. But is it something that is really in the remit of the vast majority of homebrewers? Is it something that they would do?
Nah.
You can do it, and you can buy brand new barrels of any shape, any size that you want. From, I think the smallest I've seen was 12 liters, and the largest I've seen was like 150 liters or something. So you can definitely get the barrels, but it's a complicated business, and there's lots of
it's a whole new world.
It is.
It's a whole new world.
But a lot of the breweries are getting into it. So we're saying like Brewdog is one. Kia at Wildchild, he's been playing about with his barrel aging.
Kia's barrel aging program is the fucking shit, boys, and you're going to find that one out in October.
Yeah. So
Kia's good.
Playing.
I mean, I for one, good. And I've talked about this on the podcast, so I'm getting more and more attracted to barrel-aged beer.
Well, you sat on the commercial episode and had fucking orgasms over a Flanders Red.
Well, I mean, honestly, I just think the depth of flavour that barrel aging brings is just a whole different.
And to tie it back into the podcast itself, though, it really, really, really does work incredibly well with the higher ABV beers.
It does. Yeah. I'm not 40%. Sure you can. Much like aging any beer, like if you're gonna buy a commercial beer and you're gonna choose to leave it in the bottle, you have to do that with generally anything above 7%. Otherwise, it will just go off, right?
Yeah.
Or primarily dark beers. So it's the same thing when you think about aging the beer in a bulk way. But looking back to your point, Chris, in terms of for most homebrewers, buying a barrel, getting into that whole new world of thinking about how beer interacts in a exothermic way, I guess is probably the wrong term, but in a barrel, there is oxygen kind of coming in and out of the beer, and in a weird way. Definitely. We won't get into that. That's probably another podcast.
It does breathe. When you charcoal the inside, it then uses as a filter. So when it's breathing, it does filter whatever's
breathes,
in there.
Right? Yeah, that was probably my point.
Activated charcoal,
yeah.
Anyway, my point was actually a lot of homebrewers can achieve the same outcome by using things like wood spirals, chunks of barrel, all of that sort of stuff. You can add potentially the same
flavors,
kind of flavor profile.
Yep.
But without having to worry about the complexity of barrel aging and buying a barrel and all that sort of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And I agree with that one completely. So, just to kind of bring this one to an end, because I'm fairly sure we are 15 minutes away from 3 hours, and I don't want to go over 3 hours. I know Andy needs to get to bed because he's a delicate little flower, and he's got to go and take pictures of somebody dressed up with too much makeup on tomorrow. So, Priming depends on how quick you're going to drink it. This is the packaging section. Kegging, it's going to take up real estate, but it depends on how you want to do it. You can barrel age if you're Owen. The other thing that you need to be really, really careful about when it comes to the packaging of these beers is keep it cool, keep it dark, okay? Keep the temperature low, keep the light away from it, and everything should be fine. I just want to jump back to one thing because we've not actually talked about it, and I spent a lot of time discussing this with somebody with 2 PhDs, soon to be a senior lecturer, or a lecturer rather, at a university, an incredibly intelligent man and a very, very, very good friend of mine. Also NFL fan and can literally name every country of the world and its capital. So he's a bit of a geek. When it comes to pH, I was talking to the guys on Thursday where I said I wasn't entirely convinced that you can measure the pH of a liquid once there is a solvent within it. And I was correct. Okay? You cannot measure the pH of your beer once you've pitched yeast. You're not measuring the pH. It's not an accurate representation. Okay?
Chris, I raised that one. I think it was because I was talking about brewers measuring the pH of their finished beers, and you were like, "Oh, I don't think you can do that because of the solvent, the alcohol that's in it. It's going to
you're going to be able to get an indication of where it's heading, at least, though. Surely,
if you hang on,
what was the molecule you said? It's measuring the hydrogen molecule,
right? So pH is a very, very simple thing. It is a number which represents the amount of hydrogen ions that there are within that solution. Okay.
Yes.
What scientists would use in that situation is we wouldn't use pH, we would use activity, or pKa. Okay. So pKa is simply activity. However, my discussion with the good doctor himself, basically the pKa of water is like 16.6 or 15.6 or something. I can't remember the exact numbers. I've got them written down on an email. But the pKa of ethanol is like 17. So the reality is it's really not that much further away anyway. So the pH is still going to give you a really good indication, but it isn't going to be accurate. The degree of accuracy is important when 0.2 of a pH unit can give you a massive difference with your final flavor. However, if you are consistent and you don't calibrate between runs, you are still going to get a good indication of the pH from the pK, or the pKa from the pH. So whilst, yes, you can't technically do it, the final value that you're going to get isn't going to be 1,000,000 miles away. It's probably only going to be about 100,000 miles away.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the guys know, because I told them I was going to go and speak to the good doctor himself. I'm not going to name him because, well, he asked me not to. But he's a fucking legend, all right? He's an absolute legend. And also, he kicked my ass at chess in 14 moves.
Chess master.
He's very fucking good. He's a really top bloke. Bald as fuck, top quality beard, and loves his NFL, so he's a good lad. But that's all I wanted to talk about with the pH. So other than that, I think we're done. Are we done?
I think that's pretty much
We're
it.
done.
Yeah.
Are we done?
We're done.
Check out.
We're done. Right. In that case, I'm going to copy a link to the room and I'm going to stick it into the live chat. I'm not going to press enter yet until such time as we've done the see you laters. So, Andy, love you, man. Thanks for being here. Tricky, I know you're tired, but thanks for being here. Owen, fucking love you, man. You're a legend.
Sexy as fuck.
And sexy as fuck. Yeah, you were lucky I didn't bend you over in that cafe. But it's awesome. And every time I get together, I absolutely love spending time with you guys. So, see you, bye-byes. We'll cut Audacity or recording, and then we'll move to the after party for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour.
Nice. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
I actually got an Audacity recording all the way through with no fucking flakeouts then.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
Tricky, I put in the chat when mine flaked out and for roughly how long. But I didn't speak through that whole period of time.
Right. Okay.
So we haven't lost anything. It's just you're going to have to like figure out how to resync it. Sorry, mate. Basically, my C drive basically crapped out and said you haven't got enough space in your C drive to carry on recording.
I'll chuck you 2 terabyte.
that seems to be the biggest problem. I think that's
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've got a solid state C drive and then a regular hard drive.
Yeah.
And
So you were recording to the C rather than the
yeah
big one. Yeah.
Can't you just change the file location in Audacity from your C drive to your storage drive?
Yeah, weirdly, I think it sort of saves into the C drive temporarily whilst you record, and then it saves it off into the other hard drive. But I ended up just clearing up a whole load of stuff on my C drive, and it cleared about 6 gig worth of stuff. So I sorted it out in the end, but it was a bit of a dumbass move. What number episode was that?
33.
33.
Yeah.
So sorry, Tricky, if that's going to cause you a bit of a headache for editing.
Okay,
No,
so any of you
not
guys
too
who are
big at all.
currently on YouTube who want to join us for a bit of a chat, the password and the link is now in the chat. I'm hoping I've spelt everything right. Rock, smasher, scissors, yes. And for those of you who are looking at the name of the room, tell me the TV show that it comes from.
The what?
Yeah, I think
So the name of the room is Rock, Paper, Scissors, Lizard, Spock.
Oh, that's Big Bang Theory.
Absolutely, it is. Yes. So if nobody joins within the next couple of minutes, then I'm just going to fuck it off.
Good plan.
Right, guys. I really enjoyed that. I'm about to stop the stream on YouTube. So bye-bye, YouTube. Y'all suck. Bye.
Bye.
Love you. Watch my videos.
Well, Mark's in the house.
Mark's
Evening, Mark.
in the house.
What up, brother?